Welcome back to Mystery Con. Here, I narrate conspiracy theories to help you relax and sleep. So, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, let's begin. I was just doing my job, one I had done for years, when I first noticed the discrepancy. As an urban planner, it's my job to look at blueprints, to observe city layouts and development trends, and to make sure everything aligns with regulations. But this one city plan caught my attention in a way that no other had before. At first, it seemed like a simple mistake, an oversight in the digital files, but something about it didn't sit right with me. A street that shouldn't exist, a public park in a completely illogical location, buildings designed in peculiar clusters. Nothing in the design made sense. That night, I stayed late at the office, poring over the files, pulling up old documents, and comparing designs. My desk lamp flickered and hummed, its dim light making the shadows in the office feel more oppressive. I've seen plenty of strange things in urban planning, but this felt off. It wasn't just the mistakes on the page. It was the feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I turned my head toward the office door. Empty. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights above. I sat back, rubbing my temples. No, this wasn't paranoia. The designs were deliberate. There was a pattern to the chaos. They weren't just poorly planned cities. They were engineered to make people think, feel, and act in certain ways. But why? Who would do something like this? The project in question was connected to several cities I had worked on in the past. I had dismissed them at the time as nothing more than ambitious, poorly executed projects, nothing that would have led to such a troubling conclusion. Yet now, looking at them through this new lens, they all seemed connected, and I wasn't sure if that made me feel more disturbed or more curious. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the emails that had flooded in throughout the day. Most were work-related, development proposals, zoning updates, the usual. But then there was one from a colleague, someone I had worked with on another project a few years ago. The subject line, "You might want to look at this." I clicked open the email. Attached was a folder full of city layouts from all over the world, plans for new developments, major urban centers, and revitalization projects. The files included hidden notes, some almost illegible, others clearly redacted. And then, buried in the middle of the folder, was something that stopped me cold, a city layout, perfectly normal at first glance, but within the layers of the design, I could see strange patterns. Shapes that aligned in ways I didn't recognize. A street that spiraled toward a central point. Towers and monuments that looked like something out of an ancient map. Something I couldn't place, but instinctively knew was wrong. I felt a knot form in my stomach. It was like uncovering the first piece of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. But I had to know. If this was what I thought it was, the implications would be far-reaching, bigger than anything I had ever encountered in urban development. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I printed out the layouts, spread them across my desk, and started drawing connections between the cities. The same strange elements appeared in each one, the centralized layouts, the bizarre street designs, and most chilling of all, the patterns that didn't just map out physical space, they mapped out behaviors. Subtle influences on how people would interact with each other. How they would be controlled. As the clock struck 3 in the morning, I paused and stared at the chaos of maps and notes. I was on the brink of something that didn't just challenge urban planning, it threatened everything I thought I knew about cities. These were not just designs. They were mind control hubs. Carefully crafted environments meant to manipulate, influence, and shape the very people who lived within them. I didn't know who was behind this, but I had to find out. I had to dig deeper. But as I stared at the plans, the shadow of doubt crept in. Could I trust anyone in the field anymore? Had I, too, been part of something larger than myself? I grabbed my coat. feeling the chill of the early morning air against my skin. Something told me that this wasn't just a professional curiosity anymore. This was a warning, and I was already too deep to turn back. The days that followed my discovery felt like a blur. My mind was consumed with the idea that something monumental was unfolding right beneath my nose, and yet I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. I knew I had to proceed carefully. If what I had uncovered was true, exposing it could be dangerous, not just for me, but for anyone who might get caught in the crossfire. I took the city plans home with me, poring over them at every opportunity. I kept the lights dim, the curtains drawn. No one could know about this, not yet. The deeper I dug, the more the patterns became impossible to ignore. Each layout was designed with eerie precision. It was like each city had been built around a psychological blueprint. I began to see it more clearly now: the placement of public spaces, the types of residential areas, even the roadways were engineered to push people into certain behaviors. One afternoon, I decided to visit one of the cities I had worked on previously. It wasn't far, just a few hours by car, and I felt it was the only way to get a true sense of what I was looking at. The city had always seemed normal. It was a mid-sized urban center, known for its bustling business district and a few popular tourist spots. But as I wandered the streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The architecture seemed too perfect, the buildings arranged in unnervingly precise patterns. It was as though the city itself was trying to tell me something, as if the buildings and streets were whispering secrets I wasn't supposed to know. I took photos of every street corner, every park, every plaza that seemed out of place. The most unnerving part was the way the layout flowed. There was no natural rhythm to the city. Everything led toward a central point. The city seemed to funnel its residents toward a massive central park, an open space with a stunning fountain. But as I stood in the park, I noticed something strange. The fountain was positioned perfectly, in a way that aligned with the city's central axis. It felt like the focal point of the entire city. As I walked around, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, I noticed something else. A group of teenagers gathered around the fountain, laughing and chatting. But their laughter wasn't natural. It was almost too rehearsed, like they had been coached on how to interact. Their conversations were too predictable, as if they were following some unspoken script. I took a mental step back. Was this really happening, or had I started seeing things where there were none? I snapped a photo of the fountain and walked toward the city's main library. As soon as I entered, I felt a strange tension in the air. The library was eerily quiet, but it wasn't the usual silence you'd expect from a public library. It was the kind of silence that made you feel as if the space itself was holding its breath. I found the urban planning section and pulled a few old books from the shelves. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. Then, tucked between two dusty volumes, I found it, a research paper from decades ago, detailing a global urban planning initiative that sought to optimize urban environments for human behavioral influence. The paper was dated 1972, and in the margin, there was a phrase that made my heart stop: Project Sleeper, Global Control Through Urban Design. The moment I read it, everything clicked into place. This was the project I had seen referenced in the emails. It wasn't just a conspiracy, it was real. And worse, it had been implemented. I felt a surge of panic. This was the smoking gun I'd been looking for, but it was also more dangerous than I ever imagined. As I read through the document, it became clear that this was no ordinary urban planning project. The paper outlined a global network of sleeper cities, carefully constructed hubs designed to manipulate the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors of their populations. I had to get this information out, but I knew the risks involved. As I stuffed the paper into my bag and headed toward the exit, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me. The unease lingered, thickening the air around me. Back in my car, I checked the rearview mirror again, but the road behind me was empty. My hands gripped the steering wheel. I wasn't just a planner anymore. I was in over my head. The pieces were coming together too fast now, and I didn't know how much longer I had before the conspiracy would come after me. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see were the urban plans, the lines, the patterns. I kept replaying the research paper over and over in my mind, Project Sleeper. The thought that these mind control hubs were spread across the globe, influencing countless lives, made my stomach churn. But it wasn't just the information that unsettled me. It was the growing realization that someone, or something, was watching me. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. But it didn't take long for me to start seeing the signs. The subtle, almost imperceptible things. The same black SUV that drove by my apartment every morning at exactly 9:15 a.m. The strange calls that hung up as soon as I picked up the phone. The eerie silence when I walked into my office. Like someone had been there just moments before me. I tried to brush it off, to convince myself that I was just overthinking things. But deep down I knew. This was no coincidence. Someone knew I had found out too much. I decided to meet with my old colleague Rachel. She had always been a trusted source, someone I could talk to when things got too crazy. But as soon as I met her at the local cafe, I realized something was off. She was acting strange, nervous, glancing around as if she were expecting someone. I sat down across from her, watching her fiddle with the coffee cup in front of her. "Rachel, what's going on? You're acting weird," I said, my voice laced with concern. She hesitated for a moment, then leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Sam, I can't talk here. It's not safe." A cold chill ran down my spine. My heart raced. I leaned forward, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. "What do you mean? What's not safe?" She looked around again, as if checking for eavesdroppers, and then slid a small envelope across the table. "Take this. It's everything I've been able to gather. Just don't trust anyone, Sam. Not anymore." Before I could ask her more, she stood up quickly, her eyes wide with fear. "I can't stay. They're watching." And with that, she turned and disappeared into the crowd. I sat there, frozen. I had no choice but to take the envelope, but as I slid it into my jacket pocket, I couldn't shake the feeling that my world was spiraling out of control. I had just learned that I wasn't the only one who knew about Project Sleeper. Rachel was involved too, and she was scared, terrified, even. I waited until I got home before opening the envelope. Inside were documents, notes, and photographs. As I scanned through them, my hands shook. Rachel had gathered evidence of the very same cities I had uncovered, but there was more, so much more. There were reports detailing the surveillance systems embedded in these cities, far more advanced than anything I had ever seen. Cameras weren't just monitoring the streets, they were integrated into everything. Public transport, streetlights, even the sidewalks were equipped with sensors and cameras. But the most disturbing part was the photograph, a blurry image of a man standing in front of a building. At first glance, it seemed harmless. But as I looked closer, I realized the man was wearing a coat, and in his hand was a device that resembled a small transmitter. His face was partially obscured, but something about his posture felt wrong. I zoomed in on the photo. The device in his hand wasn't just any transmitter. It was a signal disruptor, capable of scrambling communications, interfering with surveillance systems. And then it hit me. Rachel had been involved in something much deeper than I had realized. She had been a part of this, working with someone who had the power to control the very systems we had both helped design. That was when I heard it. A knock on my door. The sound was sharp and deliberate. My pulse quickened. Slowly, I walked toward the door, my mind racing. Who was it? Another ally? Or had I attracted the attention of those who didn't want this secret exposed? I cautiously peered through the peephole. There was no one outside. But as I stepped back, my eyes caught a faint reflection in the window. A man in a dark suit, standing motionless across the street, staring directly at me. I froze. Was he watching me? Or had he been waiting for me to open the door? The fear gripped me like a vice. I couldn't stay here any longer. I grabbed the documents, stuffed them into my bag, and bolted out the back door, my heart pounding. Whoever was behind this, whoever had built this web of surveillance, control, and manipulation, was closing in. And I was running out of time. I didn't know who to trust anymore. The man in the suit across the street hadn't moved when I peered out the window again. His figure had remained eerily still, like a mannequin, watching me with unblinking eyes. I couldn't explain it, but something about him felt wrong, like he wasn't just a person, but a part of something much larger, something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I had to get out of town. I spent the next few hours packing what I could, documents, my laptop, everything I had managed to uncover about Project Sleeper. I had to leave in case the people behind this were closing in on me, and as much as I hated to admit it, Rachel's warning kept echoing in my mind, don't trust anyone. It seemed like every step I took, the walls were closing in, and my every move was being watched. I drove through the night, heading toward a remote cabin I had kept hidden for emergencies. My phone was dead, and I didn't want to risk it anyway. The last thing I needed was someone tracking my location. Once I arrived, I wasted no time. I spread out the documents across the wooden table, scanning through the notes Rachel had left me. Each page revealed a deeper layer of the conspiracy. The cities weren't just being controlled by surveillance. They were being molded by psychological warfare. I found a detailed report on the influence of urban design on human behavior. The cities were being constructed to maximize stress levels, to increase conformity, and to promote specific social norms. Every corner, every building, every piece of infrastructure was meant to trigger certain emotions in people, to guide their actions. It wasn't just about surveillance. It was about manipulation on a psychological level. And it was working. The next document I opened was a redacted government file that referenced something called the Neural Influence Initiative. The more I read, the clearer it became. The initiative was a global project, a collaboration between governments, secret organizations, and private contractors. Its goal was to integrate behavior-altering technology into the very fabric of the cities themselves. Smart streets, smart homes, smart cities. The technology was designed to subtly adjust the behavior of the population. It was terrifying. They weren't just controlling where people lived, they were controlling how they lived. The cities were nothing more than massive experiments on human psychology. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything. My thoughts were racing, but there was still so much I didn't understand. The question on my mind now wasn't just who was behind Project Sleeper, but why they were doing it. What was the end goal? And how far had this web spread? I looked at the clock. It was past 3 a.m., and my exhaustion was catching up with me. I'd been working nonstop for days, and I knew I needed a break if I was going to continue this investigation. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't afford to rest. I couldn't trust anyone. Not Rachel, not even the authorities. They were all potentially compromised. I needed more information. I gathered my things and drove to the local library. The place was almost empty, and I figured I could spend a few hours digging through old urban planning records. Maybe I could find something to connect the dots even further. The eerie silence of the library gave me the chills, but I pushed through it. As I scrolled through archives, pulling up city designs and old planning documents, I stumbled across something that made my blood run cold. It was a series of hand-drawn sketches of a city, not any city, but one that looked exactly like the one I had worked on years ago. The sketches were dated back to the early 80s, far earlier than any of the official planning documents I had seen. The sketches showed a city with no streets, no roads, no cars. Instead, There were vast open spaces, squares, and circular hubs where people gathered, almost like controlled environments for large groups. But what was even more disturbing were the large buildings in the center of these areas, buildings that resembled massive antennae or towers, devices designed to broadcast something. It was as though the city itself was a giant transmitter. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus on the image in front of me. This city, designed decades ago, had already been a model for the kind of manipulation I was seeing now. I suddenly realized what I was looking at, the first sleeper city. This was where it all began. But how had it evolved into what it was today? How many other cities had been built on this same foundation? How many more were in the process of being constructed right now? The cold realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't dealing with just a few manipulated cities. This was a global operation, stretching across continents, influencing entire populations. And I was just scratching the surface. I quickly snapped a photo of the sketches and stuffed the paper into my bag. I had to leave. The longer I stayed, the more danger I was in. As I turned to walk out of the library, I heard the faintest sound, a soft click, like a door closing. I froze, then spun around. But the library was empty. My breath caught in my throat as I realized that I was not alone. The feeling of being watched had become inescapable. The quiet click in the library still lingered in my mind, and I couldn't shake the sense that I was being followed. With my heart pounding in my chest, I left the library as quickly as I could, my footsteps echoing in the empty street. I wasn't sure where I was going, just that I needed to put distance between myself and whoever was tailing me. By the time I got to my car, I had to force myself to breathe steadily. My hands were clammy, my mind racing. I was in too deep. I had uncovered more than I ever intended to. And the more I found, the more I realized just how much danger I was in. But it wasn't just about my own safety anymore. It was about stopping this before it spread any further. The truth was beginning to dawn on me. Project Sleeper wasn't just an isolated experiment. It was the foundation of a global control network, one that had infiltrated cities, governments, and societies. The cities were designed to keep the masses docile, to push them toward conformity, to manipulate how they thought, how they behaved. What started as an urban planning initiative had morphed into something far more sinister. As I sat in my car, trying to collect my thoughts, I opened the sketch of the first sleeper city again. The vast open spaces. The central towers. I studied the image closely, looking for something I had missed. Then I noticed it. There, at the center of the city's design, there was a series of smaller, almost unnoticeable lines that appeared to be leading toward the central tower. It wasn't just a random design. These lines were signals, pathways that directed people's movements, subtly influencing their behavior as they walked through the city. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about surveillance. These cities had been designed to physically and psychologically control their inhabitants. The layout wasn't just about efficiency or aesthetics. It was engineered to direct the flow of people's movements, to create an environment that encouraged conformity. But the central tower, the one in every city, was the key. It wasn't just a building, it was a control center. The realization was horrifying. I spent the next few hours scanning through every document I had gathered, every sketch, every research paper. I couldn't stop thinking about the connection between the cities, the strange symmetry that had existed in their designs, the way the architecture seemed to compel the people within them to follow an unspoken pattern. It was all coming together. But I still couldn't see the whole picture. I needed more information, more concrete evidence that could prove the scale of the operation. It was late when I stumbled across a hidden section of the folder Rachel had given me. It was buried deep within the digital files, well out of the way of the documents I had already reviewed. I clicked on it, and what appeared on the screen nearly made me choke on my own breath. It was a video. At first, I thought it was just another boring footage of urban planning presentations. Those things were a dime a dozen. But then I realized it wasn't just a presentation. It was a recording from inside a sleeper city. I couldn't breathe as I watched. The footage was from a public square, and the camera panned slowly, methodically, over the crowd. People moved through the space in perfect synchronization, as if guided by an unseen hand. It was subtle, but unmistakable. There was a uniformity to their actions that felt wrong. In the background, a figure stood near one of the central towers. It wasn't clear who they were, but their stance was rigid, almost militaristic. They weren't just observing, they were controlling. I felt sick. The video had been shot by someone inside the city, someone who had been part of the system but had decided to expose it. They had filmed the most damning piece of evidence, proof that these cities were, indeed, mind-controlled environments. As I stared at the screen, something inside me broke. This wasn't just an urban planning issue. It wasn't just about bad design. This was a massive, coordinated effort to manipulate the human mind on a global scale. I quickly saved the video, unsure of how long it would be before the authorities, whoever was behind this project, would track me down. I needed to move fast. But then I noticed something strange in the corner of the video. A symbol, faint but clear enough to make out. It was a triangle with an eye in the center, the kind of symbol you'd expect from conspiracy theorists, but it was unmistakable. It was them, the ones controlling the cities, the ones behind Project Sleeper. I stared at it for a moment, my heart sinking. It was a symbol I'd seen before, in one of the old city layouts I had studied. It was tied to a secret society, a group that had been around for centuries, operating in the shadows, controlling governments, shaping history. I had just unlocked a new layer of the conspiracy, but it felt like the deeper I went, the more dangerous things became. I closed my laptop and stood up. My thoughts were racing. What now? How could I expose this? Who could I trust? Suddenly, a loud knock at the door sent me into a panic. My breath caught in my throat as I froze. They were here. I didn't move for what felt like an eternity. The knock on the door echoed in my ears, reverberating through the empty cabin. My mind raced, calculating my options. I had to be quick. I couldn't be caught now, not when I was this close to exposing everything. I grabbed my bag, stuffed the documents and my laptop inside, and slipped toward the back window. There was a small wooded area behind the cabin. If I could make it to the trees, I could hide and figure out what to do next. My heart pounded as I slid the window open, the cold night air hitting my face like a slap. But just as I was about to climb through, I heard the sound of boots crunching against the gravel outside. They were close. Too close. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as the voices outside grew louder. There were at least two of them. I could hear their conversation, muffled but distinct. "We need to find him. He's the only one who knows about the cities," one of them said, his voice low and calm, almost practiced. The other voice replied, harsher now. "You let him get away. We need him to stop digging now." I couldn't breathe. I had been right. They were coming for me. And I wasn't prepared for what came next. I scrambled backward, tripping over the old furniture in the cabin. I couldn't stay here. Not with them so close. I grabbed my phone, dialing Rachel's number, but it went straight to voicemail. My pulse raced. I had to get out, to warn someone too. A loud crash interrupted my thoughts. Someone was trying the door. They were getting in. Without thinking, I bolted toward the back door, slamming it open and running into the woods. The trees were thick and dark, but I didn't care. I couldn't stop now. I had to keep moving. My legs burned, my breath came in short, ragged gasps as I ran, desperate for escape. I didn't dare look back. For what felt like hours, I ran through the trees, the chill of the night seeping into my bones, until finally I stopped. My heart pounded, and I leaned against a tree to catch my breath. But even in the silence of the woods, I knew they were still out there, tracking me, hunting me down. I had to find a way to stop them. In the haze of exhaustion and panic, I suddenly realized something. I still had the video. The footage I had found, proof of the mind-controlled cities, the surveillance network, the manipulation of entire populations. This was bigger than I thought. I wasn't just fighting against some rogue urban planners. I was up against a global conspiracy, one that controlled not only the cities but the people living in them. I reached into my bag, pulling out my phone again, praying it hadn't been compromised. I had to send the video to someone who could help me. My fingers trembled as I opened the file and attached the video to an email. I quickly typed a message. This is the proof. Watch it. Don't ask questions. They're coming for me. I don't have much time. Help me stop them. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I made my way to a nearby town. I needed to disappear for a while, to get some time to think. But just as I reached the outskirts of the town, I caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. A man in a suit. The same man who had been watching me from across the street days ago. He was following me. Again. I turned on my heel, slipping into an alleyway before he could spot me. My mind raced. I had no idea how much longer I could keep running. They were everywhere. I ducked into a small cafe, blending in with the crowd, hoping to stay out of sight. But my mind kept racing. What was the next step? How could I take this evidence and expose it without becoming a target? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep this went. The surveillance network wasn't just in the cities, it was global. There were cameras in every major city, tracking people's movements, listening to their conversations. But it wasn't just about watching them. It was about controlling them. The more people moved through these cities, the more data they generated. The more data, the more precise the control. They had perfected it. They knew everything. And now, they knew about me. As I sat in the cafe, watching the door, the weight of the situation finally hit me. I wasn't just uncovering the truth. I was the last obstacle in their way. They needed to silence me. And I had no idea how to stop them. I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there, but I was too focused on the conspiracy, on the danger that was closing in on me, to notice. I should have known better than to trust anyone in this mess. But the worst part was, I had trusted Rachel. She was my closest ally, the one person who had helped me piece the puzzle together. She had been there for me, even when the walls seemed to be closing in, guiding me through the darkness of this nightmare. But now, as I sat in that cafe, watching the door for any sign of the suited man who had been following me, I felt the unmistakable weight of betrayal settle in my chest. I wasn't just running from strangers anymore. I was running from someone I thought I could trust. It was late when I finally received the message. The phone buzzed in my pocket, the vibration feeling like a jolt of electricity running through my veins. I pulled it out quickly, my heart racing as I saw who the message was from. Rachel. I hesitated for only a moment before opening it. Sam, we need to talk. Meet me at the old warehouse by the docks. Midnight. Alone. The words hung in the air before me, suspended in the dim light of the cafe. My stomach turned, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. A warehouse by the docks. It sounded like a trap, and yet I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that I needed to go. I had to know the truth. I had to confront her, even if it meant risking everything. The clock struck midnight as I pulled up to the docks, the eerie stillness of the place making my skin crawl. The only sounds were the distant lapping of water against the pier and the occasional creak of old metal. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark and empty, but I could see the faint outline of someone standing by the door. I stepped out of the car, my breath fogging in the cold night air. My footsteps were the only sound in the silence as I made my way toward the door. Rachel? I called out, my voice trembling. There was a long pause before she emerged from the shadows, her face hidden in the darkness. But I could tell it was her, the same figure I had trusted, the same person who had guided me through this twisted mess. Sam, she said, her voice cold and distant. You shouldn't have come. I stepped closer, feeling the unease settle deep in my gut. What's going on, Rachel? Why are you doing this? She didn't answer immediately, her eyes darting around the empty warehouse. The look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't here to help me. They're watching us, Sam, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. They've always been watching us. And you've gone too far. My heart sank as I took a step back, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. You're one of them, aren't you? Rachel hesitated, then nodded slowly, almost regretfully. I had no choice. They have eyes everywhere, Sam. You think you're the only one who's been targeted? You think I'm the one who's been controlling all this? No. I'm just a part of it. Just like you. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just a bystander in this, she had been complicit. She had been playing both sides, guiding me toward the truth only to turn on me when I got too close. You knew about this all along, didn't you? I asked, my voice rising with anger. You knew what Project Sleeper was. You helped them. You helped build this. Rachel's eyes flickered with guilt, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she took a step toward me, her expression hardening. I didn't have a choice. They control everything. You don't understand, Sam. They have power you can't fight. I took a step back, my chest tightening with disbelief. You've been lying to me this whole time. All that talk about exposing the truth? It was all a game to you. Her face twisted into a bitter smile. No. It wasn't a game. It was survival. If I didn't help them, I would have been erased. Like all the others who tried to expose them. You think this is some kind of battle between good and evil? No, Sam. It's about power. And the people with the power always win. I shook my head, the weight of the betrayal crashing over me. I trusted you, Rachel. I thought you wanted to stop this. I thought you wanted to fight it. I do, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I can't do it alone. And now you're the one they want. You're the only one who knows the full truth, the only one who can expose them. But if you do, you'll never survive. And neither will I. A cold, bitter laugh escaped my lips. So that's it. You're just going to turn me over to them? You're just going to let them control everything? Rachel's eyes flickered with something, guilt, regret, fear, but it was gone in an instant. I have to. I don't have a choice, Sam. I never did. With that, she turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me standing alone in the darkness. I was no longer just a part of this conspiracy. I was the target. And the one person I had trusted most had just betrayed me. I didn't know what was worse, the betrayal, or the realization that Rachel had been right. The people behind Project Sleeper were everywhere, pulling the strings behind every corner of this world. And now, they were after me. I stood there in the cold, abandoned warehouse, my mind spinning with everything I had learned. The betrayal hit harder than I expected. Rachel was no longer just a friend who had helped me uncover the truth, she was an enemy. And I had no illusions about what would happen to me now that I knew too much. They would come for me. They always did. I needed to get out. I needed to disappear. I had one chance to escape, and I wasn't going to waste it. I quickly retraced my steps back to my car, the sound of my footsteps drowned by the darkness of the night. As I drove through the empty streets, I made a plan. It was a bad one, but it was all I had. I knew that I couldn't keep running forever, not without resources, and certainly not without allies. But there was one person who might still help me, David. David was an old friend of mine, a former colleague who had been working as a journalist for years, uncovering the hidden stories the world was too blind to see. He had gone off the grid years ago, too deep into his investigations to remain on the surface. But he was still one of the smartest, most resourceful people I knew. If anyone had the tools to help me bring this conspiracy to light, it was him. I had to find him. As I drove through the dark streets, my mind raced. I knew Rachel had betrayed me, but there was something in her voice that still gnawed at me. She had said she wanted to fight back, but what had stopped her? What had kept her under their thumb? And more importantly, why did she warn me? Was it because she cared, or was it because she saw me as a threat to everything she had become? I wasn't sure anymore. But I couldn't afford to waste time wondering. If I didn't get the truth out, I might not live to see another day. I arrived at David's place a few hours later, my heart still pounding in my chest. The old building was quiet, tucked away in the middle of the city's industrial district. It was the kind of place no one would ever think to look for someone who was supposed to be off the radar. I knocked on the door, my palms sweaty, but my mind set. David answered after a few moments. He looked the same, rough around the edges, his eyes tired but sharp. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer pleasantries. Instead, he stepped aside and motioned for me to come in. "You've got that look," he said, closing the door behind me. "The one you get when you've discovered something you shouldn't have." I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I pulled out the documents, the photos, the video. I laid them all on the table in front of him, watching his face as he examined each one, his brow furrowing more with every piece of evidence. "This is bigger than I thought," David finally said, his voice low. "I've heard rumors, but I didn't think it was this widespread." "I didn't think it was either," I replied, my voice shaking slightly. "But it is. And now, they're after me." David looked up from the documents, his eyes intense. "They've been after you for a while. I knew something was off when you started poking around. But I didn't realize how deep this went." I paced back and forth, unable to sit still. "Rachel, she betrayed me. She's working with them. She warned me, but she wouldn't help. She said I couldn't stop them. But I don't believe that. Not yet." David leaned back in his chair, taking a long pause before speaking. "You know what this means, don't you? The fact that Rachel's involved, that's not a coincidence. She didn't just get swept up in this. She's part of something much bigger, Sam. A system that's been in place for decades." I nodded. I knew he was right. But it didn't make it any easier to swallow. Rachel had been my friend. She had helped me see the truth, and now she was part of the very thing I was trying to destroy. "Do you have a plan?" David asked, his voice steady. I paused. It wasn't a question I had an answer to. "I need to expose them. I need to get this out to the world before it's too late. But every time I try, they come closer." Rachel wasn't lying about that. "They have eyes everywhere." David was silent for a moment, and then he nodded. "I'll help you. But you're not doing this alone anymore. We'll figure out a way to get the word out without them finding out." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. David wasn't just helping me escape anymore. He was going to help me fight back. "Thank you," I said, my voice quieter than before. "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "We've got a long way to go. But we're going to do this. Together." We had just days, maybe hours, before they would come for us. David and I had been working nonstop, piecing together everything I had uncovered, everything Rachel had given me. The video footage, the documents, the photographs, everything pointed to one thing. Project Sleeper was not just a series of isolated urban planning failures. It was a global, organized effort to control and manipulate entire populations through carefully constructed environments. Cities designed to influence thoughts, behaviors, and actions. Cities designed to be mind-controlled hubs. And the worst part? It was already too late to reverse what had been done. We knew that exposing the truth was the only way to stop it, but we also knew the risks. We were dealing with something so much bigger than just a conspiracy theory. We were up against a shadow network that had infiltrated every layer of society. Governments, corporations, even the media. "We need to get this out to the public," David said one evening as we sat in his cramped office, poring over our plans. "But we need to be careful. If we go public too soon, we're dead before we even start." I nodded, my thoughts racing. We had to be smart, strategic. But time was running out. I couldn't stop thinking about the people I'd seen in the footage. The ones walking through the cities, their movements guided by invisible forces. The more I thought about it, the more it sickened me. They were living in a world where free will no longer existed. And the worst part was, no one even knew it. "We'll need a platform big enough to reach everyone," I said, pulling out a map of media outlets across the country. "Something with a global reach. Something that can't be suppressed." David stared at the map for a moment before nodding. "I know just the place." By the next morning, we had our plan in place. The largest news network in the country, Global News Network, GNN, had a reputation for bold investigative journalism. It was the kind of platform that had a global audience, the kind of platform that could withstand the pressure of a cover-up. We'd use their system to leak the footage, the evidence, and every single document we had. No one could ignore it then. But getting access to GNN wasn't going to be easy. We had to be careful, or they would shut us down before we even got started. David had some old contacts in the network, people who owed him favors from his days as a journalist. With his connections, we managed to get a meeting with one of the senior editors, someone who could give us the platform we needed. It wasn't until late that night that we were finally sitting in the editor's office, the dim light of his desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. His name was Marcus Whitaker, and his expression was a mix of disbelief and curiosity, as David and I laid everything out in front of him. The video footage, the documents, the city plans, all of it. Marcus listened in silence, his eyes scanning each piece of evidence, as though he were trying to make sense of it. He looked up at us, his brow furrowed. This is huge," he said finally, shaking his head. "If this is real, if this can be verified, this is the kind of story that could bring down governments." I could feel the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just about exposing a hidden conspiracy anymore. It was about starting a revolution, waking people up to the reality they had been living in without even realizing it. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low. "But you both understand what this means, don't you? If we run with this story, there's no turning back. You'll be targets. The people behind Project Sleeper, they won't stop until you're dead." I glanced at David, who gave a curt nod. We had already known the risks. We couldn't let fear control us. "We're ready," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside me. "We have to expose the truth. People need to know. The world needs to know." Marcus didn't speak for a moment, and then he gave a grim nod. "All right. We'll take it. But you'd better be prepared for the storm that's coming." Within hours, our footage had been uploaded to the network's secure channels. The documents, the files, everything we had painstakingly gathered, was about to be broadcast to millions of viewers around the world. As we waited, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and terror. The truth was about to be exposed, but I knew that this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The people behind Project Sleeper would come after us with everything they had. David and I sat in silence, watching the news ticker on the TV screen as the broadcast hour approached. I could feel my heart racing, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. I had stepped into a war, and there was no going back. The clock on the wall ticked down. The broadcast began. The world was about to know the truth. And there was no turning back now. The moment the broadcast aired, I knew everything was about to change. The video flashed on screens around the world, the stark, undeniable proof of what Project Sleeper had become. The footage of the mind-controlled cities, the eerie synchronization of the people walking through the streets, the manipulation through architecture, it was all laid bare for the world to see. For a fleeting moment, there was a sense of triumph. Finally, the truth was out. The conspiracy had been exposed. But as the seconds ticked by and the broadcast continued, a rising sense of dread began to settle deep in my gut. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. David and I sat in the dimly lit room, our eyes glued to the screen as news outlets scrambled to report on the unprecedented leak. We had hoped for a rush of support, that the people would rise up, demand answers, and hold those responsible accountable. But the reaction was more muted than we expected. At first, there was shock, disbelief, confusion. People couldn't quite grasp the magnitude of what they were seeing. It wasn't until the global media began to pick up on the story that the true scale of the conspiracy started to unravel. But it wasn't just the world that was reacting. It was the organization behind Project Sleeper, the people who had orchestrated this massive web of control and surveillance. And I knew, deep down, that we had just made ourselves the most wanted people on the planet. As we sat there, watching the world's response, the door to the small room suddenly slammed open. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The man in the dark suit, the same one who had been shadowing me for weeks, stepped into the room, flanked by two others. His cold eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw the full extent of the power behind the conspiracy. This wasn't just some urban planning project. This was a global network, a shadow government that controlled everything. And I was the one who had dared to expose it. "You've made a very big mistake, Sam," the man in the suit said, his voice chillingly calm. "You think you've won? That you've taken down something so vast, so ingrained in every layer of society? You've only scratched the surface." I stood up slowly, trying to keep my composure. My heart was racing, but there was no turning back now. I had exposed them. There was no way they could silence this now, not when the world was watching. "We've exposed the truth," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "People know what you've done. The world knows. You can't stop it now." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You really think a few leaks will stop us? This network has been decades in the making, and you think a video will bring it down? You're naive." I glanced at David, who was already on his feet, ready to fight. But the reality was, we were outnumbered, outgunned. These people had the resources to destroy us without a second thought. But then, in that moment of pure terror, something unexpected happened. The lights in the room flickered, and suddenly, the man in the suit froze. He didn't move for a few seconds, and then, in a split second, everything shifted. The two men beside him collapsed to the ground, their bodies twitching. The man in the suit looked down, his expression unreadable. David was already at the door, pulling out his phone. "It's happening," he said. "The backup plan is in motion. We sent the footage to everyone, every government, every whistleblower, every hacker group. They're fighting back." The man in the suit's eyes widened in disbelief. "You," he began, but his words were cut off as his body jerked uncontrollably, as though someone had pressed the button on a remote. A few moments later, he collapsed as well, unconscious. David turned to me, his face grim but resolute. "It's over. They can't control everything anymore. It's out of their hands." I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. The fight wasn't over, but we had shifted the balance of power. The truth had been exposed, and there were millions of people out there who now knew what was really happening behind the scenes. As I looked at David, the weight of everything we had been through hit me all at once. We had risked everything, our lives, our freedom, even our sanity. But it had been worth it. The fight wasn't over, but this was the turning point. We had given people the truth, and now they had the power to change things. We did it, I said, my voice soft but sure. We stopped them. David nodded. For now. But we both knew one thing for certain. We had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The shadow that had controlled the cities for so long was finally starting to fade, but it wasn't going to disappear without a fight. The real challenge was just beginning. I didn't set out to uncover anything dangerous. I was just looking for the truth behind a political scandal, some overblown story that could bring down a senator, or maybe a CEO hiding dirty secrets. But when I found those papers, everything changed. It was a late night. The city outside my apartment blurred into a hum of streetlights and distant car engines. My eyes were bleary from hours of scrolling through encrypted data, chasing leads that never amounted to much. I needed a break. A quick distraction, something to clear my head before I fell asleep at the desk. Then, buried in a forgotten email archive I stumbled upon, I saw it, a name. Just a single name, half hidden in a document that was clearly corrupted, the Ascendants. The words jumped out at me like a punch to the gut. I'd heard whispers of a secret society in the past, rich families controlling the world from behind the curtains, but I'd always dismissed it as conspiracy theory nonsense. Now, this felt different. This felt real. I clicked open the document, my fingers trembling as the blurry words began to resolve into clearer text. The first thing I saw was a list of dates, random, at first glance. But they were all significant moments in history, revolutions, economic crashes, wars. Every event I'd studied had a date linked to it, and every date seemed connected by one thread, the Ascendants. Something twisted inside me as I read. I had always been taught that history was shaped by human choice, by the masses, by revolution, by the natural course of politics. But here, in front of me, was evidence of something much darker, a global force manipulating events from the shadows. Wars were engineered. Famine was caused by design. The economy? A puppet show. My heart raced. I shouldn't have kept reading. But I did. I couldn't stop myself. The further I went, the clearer the pattern became. The Ascendants had their hands in every major event, pulling the strings behind the scenes for centuries. And that's when I saw it, the warning. A line buried deep in the text. Those who seek to expose us will pay the price. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I felt eyes on me, as if someone had just realized I was awake, looking into the forbidden. I slammed the laptop shut. The apartment felt too small, too confining. My breath caught in my throat as the reality set in. I had found something dangerous. Something the world wasn't supposed to know. I turned to the window, watching the city below, still oblivious to the storm I had just uncovered. The weight of the discovery settled in, making the air around me feel heavy, suffocating. I thought about the people who would do anything to keep this secret hidden, people who had more power than anyone should. And I realized something else then, something that chilled me to my core. I wasn't the first person to come across these papers. I wasn't the first to ask questions about the Ascendants. Someone had been here before, trying to reveal the truth, and they were never heard from again. I didn't know it yet, but my life had already changed. I had crossed the line, and there was no going back. The question now was whether I could survive long enough to uncover the full story, or if I'd become another forgotten name in their long list of silenced voices. The next few days were a blur. My mind kept returning to that name, the Ascendants. Was it a coincidence that the file had landed in my lap, or was I meant to find it? And if so, why? As I began to look into it more, I discovered another clue, an encrypted message hidden in the same documents. Someone was trying to warn me. Someone wanted me to know that I wasn't alone in this, that others had tried to fight back. But that's when the real danger began. Someone was watching me. I couldn't stop now, not when I was so close. But there was a price to pay for pursuing the truth, and I was about to find out just how high that price would be. I should have known the moment I opened that email that I was walking into something I couldn't control. I should have shut the laptop, grabbed my coat, and gone for a walk to clear my head. But I didn't. I couldn't. That name, the Ascendants, kept echoing in my mind. Something about it felt like a call, like the universe was pushing me toward this conspiracy, forcing my hand. The next morning, I tried to move on. I had a deadline to meet, a few articles to write, but my mind kept drifting back to the document. The mention of a secret society, a global elite pulling strings behind the scenes. It was too big to ignore, too dangerous to dismiss. I had to dig deeper. I had to find out if it was all true. I started looking into the list of dates, trying to trace them to significant events in history. At first, I found nothing, just a jumble of years, wars, and political upheavals. But then one year jumped out at me, 1947. It seemed like a random year at first, but it was a pivotal one: India's independence, the beginning of the Cold War, and the start of the space race. A year that changed the course of history in so many ways. I focused on it. I dug into every event that happened that year, trying to connect the dots. That's when I found it, a reference to a top-secret government project that had been buried in history books. The name, Project Seraphim, popped up over and over, attached to a series of mysterious scientific discoveries. I found snippets of information about secret technologies, covert missions, and a shadowy group known only as the Order, the precursor to the Ascendants. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that the Ascendants had been active long before I'd even heard of them. They were there at every turning point, steering the course of human history. Every time a major event happened, they had their hands in it, pulling the strings, pushing the world toward their endgame. I knew I had to go further, but there was a problem. Someone was already watching me. The strange thing was, I didn't feel it at first. I didn't notice the oddities, the small things that made me question my own sanity. It started with the emails. At first, they were just a few cryptic messages from a burner account, but after a while, the tone changed. The warnings became more personal. The subject lines, once vague, started to address me directly. "You're too close," and "It's too late for you." The last email I received had a single sentence: "They are already on to you." I should have been terrified. I should have deleted the account, shut everything down, but instead I sat there, staring at the screen. It wasn't just a threat, it was a sign that I was on the right track. The Ascendants had noticed me, and I wasn't going to stop now. I couldn't. I started going through the old archives, looking for anything that connected Project Seraphim to modern-day events. It didn't take long to find another link, one that sent a chill down my spine. The project had been shut down in the 1950s, but the technology developed during that time had mysteriously resurfaced decades later. In a classified report, I found an unsettling reference to surveillance systems designed to track dissidents. A line of text that seemed like a throwaway comment, but now, it made my blood run cold. Was this the system watching me? I leaned back in my chair, my heart racing. This wasn't just a random conspiracy. This was bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. The Ascendants weren't just some shadowy group. They controlled the flow of history, and they had eyes everywhere. As I started to piece everything together, I heard a knock at the door. My first thought was that it was a delivery. I had ordered some takeout. But when I opened it, there was nothing. No package. No food. Just a single envelope, resting on the doorstep. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. Inside was a plain white card. No name, no return address, just one word written in black ink: "Stop." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Whoever had sent this wasn't just watching me, they were warning me. I shoved the card into my pocket and slammed the door shut, locking it. My mind raced, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I considered stopping. Maybe this was a warning I shouldn't ignore. But something told me that backing down now would mean losing everything: the truth, the fight, the chance to expose the ascendants. I stared at the laptop screen again, feeling the weight of the secret I was carrying. The mystery was deepening. I had found the first major clue, but the deeper I went, the more dangerous it became. I wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. It's one thing to uncover a conspiracy. It's another to realize just how deep it runs, and how far the powers that be are willing to go to protect it. After the envelope, after the warning, I couldn't ignore the danger anymore. But the more I dug, the more I realized that I was in over my head. The Ascendants weren't just some group of powerful elites pulling strings behind the scenes. No, they were the puppet masters of history itself. Their influence was woven into the fabric of every major event, from the Cold War to the rise of corporate power. They didn't just control the money, they controlled the very course of human progress. I had no choice but to keep going, even as my paranoia deepened. I'd seen enough to know that I wasn't just up against a secret society. This was a global, shadowy network that spanned governments, corporations, and even the media. And they had a system. A system that could track me, every move I made, every piece of data I uncovered. It wasn't until I found the black site that everything changed. The site itself was just an old building in the middle of nowhere, a derelict research facility with layers of government security, some of it dating back to the 1950s. According to the reports I found, it had been involved in the very same Project Seraphim I'd uncovered. But when I arrived, it was empty. The building had been abandoned for decades. Or so it seemed. I stood there, in front of a rusted gate, staring at the dark windows of the building. It felt like something was waiting for me, something watching from the shadows. The building was quiet, too quiet. As if the very air was holding its breath. But I had come too far to turn back. The data I'd collected hinted at the truth being hidden here, somewhere in this very building. I stepped forward, my footsteps echoing as I pushed open the rusted gates. It wasn't long before I found the entrance, and with it, a buried access point to an underground facility. I didn't have a key, but the feeling of being watched pushed me forward. There was no time to hesitate. I had to get in. The door was heavy, metal, and old. I pried it open with all the strength I had, and when it creaked open, I nearly choked on the smell of dust and decay. But what really caught my attention were the files. A small, dimly lit room at the far end of the corridor was filled with old cabinets and crates. Files piled high, documents and blueprints with no names, just numbers. I pulled out a stack of them, flipping through papers that detailed covert operations, military tests, and strange research, most of it redacted, some of it blacked out entirely. But there was something else buried inside, the Ascendants again. Every page seemed to be linked to their influence, their operations, their hands in every covert military project, every corporate buyout, every conflict. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that this wasn't just about controlling politics. The Ascendants had their fingers in everything: science, technology, media. They weren't just shaping events, they were shaping reality itself. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every shift in global power was part of their plan. But then I found something else. A name. It was a name I hadn't come across before: the Guardians. The name appeared on one of the files marked Classified, Level 5. Underneath it, in fine print, were references to a group that seemed even more dangerous than the Ascendants. The Guardians were an elite faction within the Ascendants' ranks, and their purpose was far darker: to silence any who tried to expose the truth. They didn't just control history, they controlled the truth itself. I stared at the paper for what felt like hours, the cold air of the basement pressing in around me. The Guardians weren't just a secret, they were the secret. They were the enforcers, the ones who made sure the Ascendants' power remained unchecked. And from the way the documents described them, they had no qualms about eliminating anyone who got in their way. The implications of this hit me like a freight train. The Ascendants controlled everything, but the Guardians kept the truth hidden. They erased history, manipulated facts, and made sure that no one ever got close to the real story. They were the true power behind the throne, and now I had uncovered them. I wasn't safe anymore. The realization that I had crossed a line, the same line that so many before me had crossed, hit me hard. If the Ascendants controlled history, then the Guardians controlled the story. And I had just become a part of that story. I had drawn their attention, and now they were coming for me. But I couldn't stop. Not now. I couldn't turn back and pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen. I couldn't walk away from the truth. And that meant I was going to have to face the consequences. I should have been terrified, but the fear wasn't what consumed me. It was the overwhelming weight of what I had uncovered, the sheer scale of it all. Every step I took felt like it was leading me deeper into a shadowed world that was more dangerous than I had ever imagined. The Ascendants weren't just a group of powerful men and women pulling strings. They were an institution, an ideology that spanned centuries. And their grasp was tightening around me. The files I'd found in that abandoned facility had shaken me, but they had also opened a door, one that led to more questions than answers. What had I stumbled onto? Why had the Ascendants and their Guardians allowed this much to remain? Could it be a mistake? A trap? I had to dig deeper. There was no other choice. The more I learned, the more I realized that everything I knew about the world, about history, had been manipulated. But the truth was always just out of reach, hidden behind layers of deception, misinformation, and careful erasure. I started to reach out to people who might know something about the Ascendants, about the Guardians, about everything. It wasn't long before I realized that I wasn't the first person to try to unravel this conspiracy. The more I dug, the more I found whispers of others who had tried to expose the truth. Some had disappeared without a trace. Others had left behind fragments of information, like breadcrumbs, scattered across the digital landscape. I found an old forum, buried deep in the dark web. It was full of encrypted messages, half-broken links, and abandoned threads. But one post caught my attention. It was from someone who called themselves the Seeker. The post was brief, just a few lines, but it was clear that they had been onto something big. It read, "The Ascendants can't control everything. Find the key. They've hidden it in the history books. Don't trust anyone." I saved the message, but something about it felt off. Who was the Seeker? Had they found the key? What was the key? And why had they left such a cryptic warning? The more I pondered, the more questions piled up. But as I continued to search for answers, I began to notice the signs that something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, closely, intently. I thought back to the envelope I'd found at my door. I had ignored it, brushed it off as a scare tactic. But what if it wasn't? What if I was already too far into their sights? I decided to take a risk. I couldn't keep chasing shadows. I needed hard evidence, something concrete. So, I went back to the facility. I didn't want to, but I knew it was my only chance. The truth was buried there, in the vaults of that underground labyrinth. There had to be more. There had to be something that could connect the Ascendants to modern-day operations. When I arrived, the building seemed just as abandoned as the last time. There was no sign of life, no guards, no vehicles, no security. I thought I'd be in and out, but as I approached the door, I felt a strange vibration in the air. Like the building was alive, pulsing with something unseen. I hesitated but forced myself inside. The musty smell hit me again as I descended into the lower levels. I followed the familiar path, past the now empty offices and unused equipment. It felt wrong. But I kept moving, driven by the need to find answers. That's when I stumbled across it, a hidden room, tucked away behind a false wall. The door was half open, as if someone had just left. Inside, there were stacks of books, ancient-looking tomes that seemed far too old to be part of any government archive. I pulled one from the shelf, its leather cover cracked and worn. Inside, the pages were filled with strange symbols and words I couldn't understand. They looked ancient, like something from another time, another world. As I flipped through the pages, I noticed something even more disturbing. There, among the bizarre diagrams and cryptic language, was a mention of the Guardians. The text spoke of their origins, their purpose, and a ritual that bound them to the Ascendants. The more I read, the more I realized that these were no ordinary people. They weren't just power-hungry elites. They were something much darker, much older. The ritual they practiced wasn't just about power, it was about control. They had been manipulating humanity for centuries, using secret knowledge to shape the world. And the key to their power? It was right here, hidden in plain sight. I needed to leave. I could feel it. Someone was coming. But as I turned to leave the room, I froze. There, in the shadows, was a figure. A person, watching me. I hadn't heard a sound. I didn't know how long they'd been there. I couldn't even see their face, just a silhouette against the dim light. "Looking for something?" a voice asked, smooth and calm, but with an edge of something dark. My blood ran cold. The figure stepped closer, their presence heavy, suffocating. I didn't recognize them, but I knew one thing: they weren't here to help. I thought I had prepared myself for the worst. I thought that after everything I'd uncovered, the files, the warnings, the strange figure in the shadows, I was ready for whatever came next. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. The figure in the room had spoken, their voice smooth, almost too calm. "Looking for something?" I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I should have run, bolted out of the room before they saw me, but it was too late. I had already been caught. There was no turning back now. I tried to steady my breath, to act casual, but my mind was racing. The figure took a step forward, just enough for the dim light to catch their features. A woman. Her sharp, calculating eyes glinted in the low light, but it was the way she moved, graceful, predatory, that sent a chill down my spine. She didn't look like a government agent, or a mercenary. She wasn't wearing any uniform or armed with the typical tools of someone sent to stop me. She was dressed in black, with a thin leather jacket that seemed out of place in this cold, damp underground room. There was no mistaking it. She was no ordinary person. She was one of them. A guardian. For a moment I said nothing. I couldn't trust myself to speak. My mind was racing, looking for a way out. But there was no easy escape. Not this time. "You've been digging," she said softly, like she knew exactly how far I'd come, how close I was to unraveling the whole thing. "You've found something, haven't you?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure if I could without giving myself away. "You're too curious for your own good," she continued, her tone almost sympathetic, as if she were speaking to a child who had wandered too far into dangerous territory. "You've uncovered truths you shouldn't have. You've seen things that will change everything, and that's exactly why you need to stop." I swallowed hard, trying to hide my fear. I'd heard rumors of the Guardians, powerful enforcers who silenced those who dared to expose the Ascendants. I'd heard whispers about their ability to track people, to control information. But facing one in person was something else entirely. "What do you want from me?" I finally managed to croak, my voice thick with tension. I knew the answer already. She wanted me to stop. To back off. But there was no way in hell I was going to. She smiled, a chilling smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't want anything. But I can promise you one thing: if you keep going, if you keep digging into what's best left buried, you'll be a footnote in history. Just another name on the list of those who tried and failed." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had always known the stakes were high, But hearing it from her, someone who seemed to have the power to erase me from existence, made it real. She wasn't threatening me with words. She was offering me a glimpse into the future I was heading toward if I didn't stop now. But as much as I wanted to back down, something inside me wouldn't let me. I had already seen too much. I couldn't just walk away and pretend nothing was wrong. The truth was out there, and I had to find it, no matter the cost. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, more to convince myself than her. But the words rang hollow, even to my own ears. The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped closer, closing the gap between us until she was just a few feet away. I could feel the tension in the air, thick with the weight of unspoken threats. "You should be," she said softly. Then, as if the moment had passed, she stepped back and turned toward the door. "I don't want to kill you. I don't want to erase you from the world. But you don't understand what you're dealing with. You don't understand who you're up against." She paused before leaving the room. "But soon you will." With that, she disappeared into the shadows, her footsteps fading into the distance. I stood there, frozen, in complete silence. Her words echoed in my mind like a warning bell. I didn't know if she had left to get help or if she had simply given up on me. But one thing was clear: the Ascendants weren't just a group of power-hungry elites. They were a machine, a system that controlled everything, and anyone who tried to challenge it was erased without a second thought. I had to keep going. I had no other choice. But now, I understood the stakes more than ever. I wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. I was fighting for my life. And as I picked up the files from the shelf and prepared to leave, I noticed something that had been buried beneath the stack of papers: an old, faded photograph. I held it up, my breath catching in my throat. It was a picture of a group of men and women, sitting around a table, their faces obscured by shadows. But at the front of the group, one face was clear. It was a man I recognized from the research I'd done, the founder of the Ascendants. And in the background, barely visible, was the symbol of the Guardians, the same one I had seen in the documents. The photo wasn't just a picture, it was a map. A key. And I had just unlocked it. There's a certain feeling you get when you're surrounded by people you trust, but somewhere deep inside, you feel a whisper of doubt, a nagging sensation that something isn't right. It was a feeling I ignored for too long, and I should have listened to it. After the encounter with the Guardian, I was shaken, but I couldn't stop. The Resistance, my new allies, were the only people I had left. We were all in this together, fighting against an enemy that controlled everything. But the deeper I dug, the more I began to wonder, was I truly surrounded by friends, or had I been led into a trap? We had formed a small, tight-knit group, piecing together the puzzle of the Ascendants. There was Jack, the former hacker-turned-researcher, whose skills had proven invaluable. Mia, an ex-journalist who had lost everything after exposing corruption in the government. And David, the strategist, who had connections in underground political movements. Together, we were unstoppable, or so I thought. The first crack came when I noticed Jack acting a little too casual about the things we were finding. He'd always been sharp, quick to connect the dots, but lately he was too calm, too composed, almost detached from the gravity of what we were uncovering. He didn't react to the dangerous implications of our discoveries the way the rest of us did. Instead, he'd make light of it, dismissing things with a half-hearted joke, like he wasn't as invested in the fight as the rest of us. One night, while we were huddled over a pile of new documents I had recovered from a classified government vault, Jack was quieter than usual. His eyes kept flickering to his phone, and I caught him glancing at me with a strange look in his eyes. I decided to confront him. "Is there something going on with you, Jack?" I asked, my voice low, my eyes narrowing. I could feel it. Something was off. He shifted uncomfortably, but then smiled. "What are you talking about, Sarah? I'm just trying to help. You're the one on edge." I hesitated, but the doubt in my gut only grew. "I don't know." It's like you're not as passionate as the rest of us. Like you're holding something back. Jack's smile faded. That's ridiculous. We're all in this together, aren't we? You think I'm some kind of... He stopped mid-sentence, as if caught in a lie. His words didn't feel genuine anymore. They felt rehearsed. The room fell silent for a long moment, and I saw Mia exchange a glance with David. That was when I knew. I wasn't the only one who was starting to see something strange in Jack's behavior. But the real shock came a few days later, when we finally managed to decode the final portion of the encrypted file we'd been working on for weeks. It wasn't just a list of names, it was a list of key players in the global network of the Ascendants, people who had been embedded in major industries, governments, and organizations for decades. At the very bottom of the list, under the heading, Agents, was one name I never expected to see, Jack Miller. I felt the blood drain from my face as I stared at the screen. My hand shook, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Jack wasn't just one of us, he was one of them. He had infiltrated the resistance from the very beginning. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the screen, feeling the world tilt beneath me. I was betrayed. The person I trusted most was working for the enemy. He had been lying to us all along, feeding us misinformation, and sabotaging our efforts. I couldn't understand how I had missed it. How had I been so blind? The way he'd kept dodging the tough questions, the way he'd always been too calm when things got too close to the truth, it was all part of the act. He was never on our side. I tried to keep my composure, but the weight of it all pressed down on me like a heavy stone. I had trusted him. I had shared everything with him. And now, he was playing us for fools. Mia and David must have noticed my reaction, because they moved quickly, their eyes widening in realization. Is it true? Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Is Jack one of them? I nodded, my throat tight. He's been a mole this entire time. David clenched his fists. We need to confront him, now. But I wasn't so sure anymore. Confronting Jack would only put all of us in danger. He was a sleeper agent, embedded deep within our group, and if he knew we were onto him, the Ascendants wouldn't just eliminate him, they'd eliminate all of us. I didn't know how much longer we had. If we confronted him directly, we'd be exposed. But if we did nothing, the Ascendants would continue to control us from within. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. Jack was more than just an ally. He was a reflection of everything that had been wrong with the system we were fighting against. The Ascendants didn't just control the world, they had the power to turn anyone, even the people closest to you, into their puppets. I had to make a choice. We all did. We could expose Jack, risk everything, and hope for the best, or we could play along and wait for the perfect moment to take him down. But one thing was certain, we couldn't trust anyone now, not even each other. The silence between us was deafening. The air felt thick, like we were all trapped in a web of lies, too afraid to move, too afraid to speak. I couldn't look at Jack. Every time my gaze fell on him, I saw betrayal, his smile, his warmth. Everything now felt like a mask. A lie. The others hadn't said anything about the discovery yet, but I knew they were thinking the same thing. David kept glancing at Jack, his eyes narrowed in suspicion, while Mia's face was pale, her expression unreadable. I had to act fast. The longer we waited, the more chance Jack had to play his hand. He was too clever to make a move without thinking it through. And that scared me. I turned away, pretending to study the documents scattered across the table. I needed time to think. How had we missed it? How had we let him get so close? I ran over every conversation, every moment he'd spent with us, but nothing stood out, not until now. Jack was good. Too good. I think we need to split up, I said suddenly, my voice breaking the silence like a knife. The others turned to look at me, confusion in their eyes. We can't trust anyone anymore. We need to cover our tracks and figure out who else might be compromised. Mia shook her head. Are you saying we don't confront him? Not yet? I glanced at Jack, who had remained unusually quiet since I had made the discovery. He was sitting back, arms crossed, his eyes following every movement in the room, but he wasn't speaking. Was he waiting for me to say something? Was this his game, letting me stew in the uncertainty until I gave in? I don't know if confronting him now is the best idea, I said slowly, my thoughts racing. He's a sleeper agent, and we don't know who else he's working with. If we're wrong, he'll know we're onto him, and then we'll be exposed. If we do it too soon, if we make one wrong move, it's over. David stood up and slammed his fist on the table. We can't keep dancing around this, Sarah. He's a damn traitor. He's been playing us this whole time. Maybe, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But right now, we don't know what he knows. He could be in contact with the Ascendants at this very moment. What if he's been feeding them everything we've uncovered? What if they already know what we're planning? Mia's face went pale, and David's expression softened with a hint of understanding. The truth was, we were all in the same position now. We didn't know who to trust. Jack wasn't just an enemy. He was part of something far bigger, an insidious network that had been manipulating us from the inside. A sleeper agent, planted in our ranks from the beginning. The resistance wasn't just fighting the Ascendants anymore. We were fighting the very people who were supposed to be on our side. We decided to lay low for a while. We would separate, hide our tracks, and make sure Jack couldn't follow our movements. The stakes were higher now, and the risk of exposure was more real than ever. The next few days passed in a haze of paranoia. We worked in silence, communicating only through encrypted messages, always looking over our shoulders. Every phone call, every knock at the door made us jump. But something wasn't right. It was too quiet. Jack had been eerily absent, and when he did appear, he was distant, almost as if he were waiting for something, waiting for us to make the first move. It felt like he was watching us, calculating, deciding when to strike. I wasn't sure if it was his silence that unnerved me or the fact that I could feel his presence even when he wasn't in the room. Then, 2 days after we decided to lay low, I found something that made my heart stop. I had returned to the safe house late that evening, my mind racing with new information I'd uncovered, when I noticed it. The subtle shift in the atmosphere, the small detail that shouldn't have been there, a piece of paper, folded neatly on the kitchen counter. It had no name, no return address. But I could feel it in my gut. It was a message for me. I opened it carefully, almost afraid to see what was written. The words were simple. I know who you are. My stomach turned. I immediately thought of Jack. How had he known I was here? How had he been able to track me so easily? But then, something else caught my eye. The handwriting wasn't his. It was too neat, too precise. And it wasn't just the handwriting that set off alarms, it was the paper itself. It wasn't ordinary. It was the same type of paper I had seen in some of the files from the facility. The same paper that had been used in the Ascendant's encrypted documents. Someone had been watching me. And Jack wasn't the only mole in our group. This wasn't just about Jack anymore. There was someone else in the Resistance who had been working with him all along, someone who had been feeding us false information, steering us away from the truth. I looked around the room, feeling the walls close in around me. I had to act fast, or we were all going to be caught in a trap we couldn't escape. The question now wasn't who had betrayed us. It was how far the web of deception stretched, and how many more sleepers were waiting to expose us to the Ascendants. The walls were closing in, and I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. Jack wasn't the only one in our group working for the Ascendants. That realization hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just about infiltrating our small resistance. The Ascendants had a far broader reach. They had spies, agents, and informants planted everywhere, even among those who called themselves our allies. I wasn't sure who else could be trusted anymore. Every conversation felt like a trap, every glance, every word could be a signal to someone I didn't even know. The paranoia had set in, thick and suffocating, and it was becoming harder to separate friend from foe. I had to make a decision. The Ascendants had been manipulating history, controlling events, pulling the strings from behind the scenes for centuries. But now, I had uncovered something even more dangerous. They were setting up a new order, a new world, where they would be unchallenged and absolute. And the Guardians? They were the enforcers, the ones making sure that nothing, not even the smallest rebellion, could disrupt the status quo. I couldn't do this alone anymore. The resistance had become fractured, and I was the one holding the pieces together. But even then, I was starting to feel the cracks. I couldn't trust anyone in the group. But there was something else I had uncovered in the past few days, something even more unsettling. I had traced the Ascendant's web deeper, through hundreds of encrypted files, countless dead ends, and government documents. It wasn't just a network of powerful elites. No, the Ascendants had a far-reaching grip on every corner of society, politics, media, corporations, science, even the military. They didn't just control events, they controlled the narrative. The final piece of the puzzle came when I uncovered a classified document that described something called the Nexus, a secret program designed to create a global surveillance system. It was more than just monitoring communications or tracking movements. It was about manipulating entire populations, controlling the flow of information, and rewriting history as it happened. The Ascendants had a system in place, one that ensured they remained in power, no matter what. The Nexus wasn't just about surveillance. It was about reshaping the world to fit their vision, about erasing any traces of dissent and controlling the truth itself. I stared at the document, my heart pounding. The implications were staggering. They had already begun implementing the system. The rise of social media, the manipulation of news outlets, the constant surveillance. We were living in it, and most people had no idea. The world we thought we knew was a facade, a carefully constructed illusion created by the Ascendants to keep the masses in check. But the deeper I looked, the more dangerous it became. The Nexus wasn't just a program. It was a web that entangled everyone in its grip. And I had uncovered the blueprint. I was holding the key to dismantling the system, but it wasn't going to be easy. The Ascendants would stop at nothing to keep this secret buried. The moment they realized I had this document, they would come after me with everything they had. I had to move fast. I gathered the documents, everything I'd found, every shred of evidence. It was all I had left. The resistance had become too compromised, too fractured. The people I thought I could trust were now as much a part of the system as the Ascendants themselves. I had to get this information out before they found me. As I gathered my things and prepared to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I'd never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. The walls had ears. The Ascendants had eyes everywhere, and they were closing in on me. I made my way out of the safe house, my mind racing. I needed to find a way to get the truth out, before they silenced me like they had silenced so many others. But the closer I got to the exit, the more I realized I wasn't just running from the Ascendants. I was running from the very people I thought I could trust. There was a mole in the resistance, and I didn't know who it was. That was when I heard it, footsteps behind me, quick and light. I turned around, my pulse quickening. It was Mia. She looked different, calm, collected, almost too composed. "Sarah," she said, her voice steady, "you're not going anywhere." I froze. The weight of her words hit me like a hammer. She knew. She knew everything. "You can't hide the truth forever," Mia continued, her eyes cold. "You think you've won, but you've only just begun to understand how deep the web goes." I didn't know what to do. There was no one left to turn to. The Ascendants had already won. I had exposed their plan, but now I had no way to stop it. There's a point in every battle where you realize you've crossed the line. It's not the first fight, not the first casualty, but that moment when you understand that there's no going back. You've committed. You've chosen a side. And there's no escaping it now. For me, that moment came when I realized Mia wasn't just a mole. She was part of something far worse, the system itself. The Ascendants had manipulated everything, every step of the way. Mia wasn't just protecting their secrets. She was one of their guardians, an enforcer trained to silence anyone who threatened their power. And now, I had to decide. Would I fight back, knowing the cost? Or would I run, disappear into the shadows, and hope that I could live the rest of my life in peace, knowing that the Ascendants had won? I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The truth was out there, and I had one final chance to expose it. I didn't know how much time I had. I didn't know if Mia was coming after me or if the Ascendants had already planned my demise. But I had no choice. If I wanted to stop them, if I wanted to break their control over the world, I had to take action. It was time for the resistance to strike back. I couldn't do it alone. The rest of the group was compromised, and I couldn't trust anyone. But there was one person left, David. He had been the strategist, the one who kept us moving forward, even when things seemed impossible. I didn't know if he was still on my side, but I had to try. I sent him a message. It was simple, encrypted, and to the point. Meet me at the old facility. It's time to finish what we started. I didn't know if he would show up, but I had to believe that someone still cared enough to fight. I had to believe that the resistance wasn't dead, even if the people I trusted most had betrayed me. The night was dark, colder than usual, as I made my way back to the facility, the one place I'd uncovered the truth. I didn't know how I was going to take down the Ascendants, but I knew this was where it had all started, and it would be where it ended. This was the nerve center, the heart of their web, and I needed to shut it down. I couldn't let them continue. The Nexus had to be exposed for the world to see. When I arrived, I found David waiting for me. His face was grim, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, determination, maybe even a hint of regret. "You're still here," I said, my voice almost a whisper. It felt strange to be in this place again, the place that had nearly destroyed me. "I'm not giving up, Sarah," David said quietly. "We still have a chance. But we have to do this carefully. The Ascendants are everywhere, and they're always watching." I nodded. He was right. It wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about survival. We couldn't just barge in and hope for the best. The Ascendants would kill us the moment they realized what we were doing. Together, we made our way into the building. It was eerily quiet, too quiet. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. It was like the facility was holding its breath, waiting for us to make the first move. We went straight to the central hub, the room where the Nexus program had been developed. The computers were still there, blinking dimly in the dark, waiting to be activated. I felt like I was walking into a lion's den, but I couldn't stop now. This was it. The final piece. David plugged in the external drive I brought with me, a key that would access the files we needed to expose the truth. As the screen flickered to life, I held my breath. The data began to load. Thousands of files. But it wasn't just about the Nexus anymore. It was about everything, the whole system that the Ascendants had built, the way they manipulated global events, the way they controlled everything we saw, heard, and believed. "We have to broadcast this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We can't just leave this here. We need to let the world see it." David nodded. He was already pulling up the broadcast settings, bypassing security measures with practiced ease. "It's risky," he warned, his fingers moving rapidly over the keyboard. "Once we hit send, there's no turning back." I didn't hesitate. "Do it." The data began streaming, uploading to a secure server that would make it public. The entire world would see the truth. We were minutes away from exposing everything: the Ascendants, the Guardians, the Nexus. All of it. That's when it happened. The alarms went off, and the building was suddenly alive with movement. The Ascendants knew. They were here. They had found us. "Get the data out!" I yelled to David, but the words were barely out of my mouth before the door to the control rooms slammed open. Mia stood there, flanked by 2 other Guardians, her eyes cold, her expression unreadable. "You really thought you could stop this?" Mia's voice was calm, almost clinical. "You've exposed nothing but your own foolishness." David's hands moved quickly, trying to finish the upload, but we were running out of time. The Guardians moved closer, their presence suffocating. "Mia," I said, stepping forward, "you don't have to do this. You don't have to be part of this." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. But then her mask was back on. "I've already made my choice, Sarah. And so have you." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. This was it. The resistance had struck back. But now, it was a race against time. Would the truth be exposed before they silenced us? Or would we be erased, another failed attempt to break the Ascendant's grip on the world? I didn't know how it would end. But one thing was certain: the war had just begun. The room was filled with the low hum of the monitors, the alarms still blaring in the background. Time was running out. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears. Mia and the Guardians were closing in on us, but David was still at the terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard, desperately trying to finish the upload. We couldn't let them stop us, not now. Not after everything we'd uncovered. "You think you're going to win?" Mia's voice was cold, mocking. "This is bigger than you, Sarah. You can't fight something this entrenched." Her words struck me like a slap in the face, but I couldn't afford to be distracted. I couldn't afford to feel anything but the desperate need to finish what we started. We had exposed the Ascendant's power, their manipulation, and their control. If this data made it to the public, it could break their stranglehold on the world. But we had to make it through first. David's hand hovered over the send button. He glanced at me, his expression grim, but resolute. I nodded. There was no turning back now. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. "Do it," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos around me. David hit the key. The data began to upload, streaming out of the facility and into the secure server we'd prepped, ready to be broadcast across the globe. I could see it happening, the countdown ticking down to 0. The world would know. The Ascendants couldn't stop it. We were finally going to expose everything. But just as the final line of code was executed, everything went black. The monitors flickered, and then the room was plunged into darkness. The sound of the alarm stopped, replaced by a chilling silence. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I turned to David, but his face was pale, his eyes wide in disbelief. "What happened?" I asked, my voice frantic. I don't know," he said, his hands trembling. "The system, it's been hacked. They've stopped the broadcast." I could feel the panic rising in my chest. We were so close. The Ascendants had done it again. They had found a way to shut us down before we could finish. But just as I thought it was all over, the emergency lights flickered back on. And on one of the screens, a new message appeared. "The war is only just beginning." I stared at the screen, the words burning into my mind. The message wasn't from us. It wasn't from the Ascendants either. It was a new player, a group that had been watching, waiting in the shadows. "We've been exposed," Leah said, her voice tight. "You've won for now, but you're not the only ones who want the truth to come out." The Guardians didn't move. They were still watching us, but now their expressions had shifted. It wasn't just about stopping us anymore. It was about something else. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. The Ascendants weren't the only force controlling the world. There were others, other groups, other factions who had been waiting for their chance to seize power. We had opened the door, but we hadn't just revealed the Ascendants, we had shown the world how deep the manipulation went. Mia stepped forward, her eyes dark. "You've started something you can't finish. The truth is too dangerous. It'll destroy everything. You can't control it anymore," I said, my voice shaking. "The truth is out. The world will never be the same." Her expression softened, just for a moment, before she turned away. "You're right," she said quietly. "But it's not your fight anymore." With that, she and the Guardians walked out, leaving me standing there with David. The silence that followed felt like the calm before a storm. "We did it," David said quietly, his voice a mix of disbelief and exhaustion. "We exposed them. But the fight's not over," I finished for him. The war wasn't over. The Ascendants were still out there, their network still intact, but the world was different now. The truth had been revealed, and no amount of control or manipulation could ever erase it. The gates had been opened, and there was no closing them again. I didn't know what the future held, or how we were going to fight back against the forces that controlled the world. But one thing was certain, the battle was just beginning, and I would fight for the truth, no matter the cost. It was a stormy evening when I stumbled upon it. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and ancient stone as the thunder rumbled ominously above us. My boots sank into the mud with every step, and my flashlight flickered with the kind of instability that sent a shiver down my spine. The wind howled through the trees, but I hardly noticed. All I could think about was the old cave we were standing in front of, the one no one had ever ventured into, not even the most experienced archaeologists. I was on my final field expedition before returning to the sterile world of research. But this was different. My name is Dr. Alina Hayes, an archaeogeneticist. I've spent years studying the links between ancient civilizations and their evolutionary connections to modern humans. Theories, speculations, and papers had been written, but no one had dared to uncover the truth. And yet, something about this cave felt different. It called to me. The entrance was hidden behind a veil of vines, barely visible in the fading light. But my team and I had managed to clear it with only minimal effort. As I stepped closer to the mouth of the cave, the familiar hum of technology surrounded me. The GPS tracker, the sensor equipment, and my trusty tablet were all at the ready. But there was something else in the air, a strange, inexplicable weight that seemed to slow my movements. The darkness inside swallowed the beam of my flashlight, but I pushed forward. My heart raced in anticipation and uncertainty. What was I expecting to find? My colleagues and I had theorized that this region might house an undiscovered archaeological site, but nothing prepared me for what awaited me at the back of that cave. The walls were lined with smooth carvings, symbols that seemed to pulse with a hidden life of their own. They weren't just art, they were messages. Ancient messages, coded in a way I had never seen before. The air shifted as I ran my fingers over the symbols, an unsettling sensation crawling up my spine. Something told me I was about to uncover a secret too large to be contained within these stone walls. As we ventured deeper into the cave, we came across an unusual object embedded in the ground, half buried beneath centuries of sediment. A metallic hatch, gleaming strangely under the flashlight's beam, seemed out of place in this natural cavern. It was smooth, almost too perfect. But what caught my attention wasn't just the hatch. It was the symbol carved into its surface, a double helix, one that seemed to shimmer as if alive. The markings were familiar. Too familiar. I had seen similar designs in genetic texts, ancient manuscripts, and even the darkest corners of our modern understanding of human evolution. But this was different. There was something deliberate about it, something that tied our history to forces far beyond anything I could comprehend. I bent down, my fingers brushing the cold, metallic surface. It seemed to hum under my touch, as though it was waiting for something, or someone, to activate it. My team members murmured in the background, their voices a blur against the overwhelming weight of discovery. They were excited, too. But I felt something else, a tightening in my chest, a strange urgency in the air. Something wasn't right. As I stood there, caught between fascination and fear, a thought crossed my mind. What if the human story was never meant to be told this way? What if our origins had been engineered, shaped by forces we had no hope of understanding? And that's when I realized, this was no ordinary discovery. We weren't just about to uncover the past. We were about to unlock the truth about our very creation. The first twist, the strange humming sound beneath my fingertips. My hand jerked back in surprise. The hatch shifted slightly, as though responding to my presence. Then, as if acknowledging the significance of the moment, the atmosphere in the cave seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Was it too late to turn back? I glanced at my team, their faces lit with excitement. But in the pit of my stomach, something dark was beginning to take shape. A realization that the answers we were about to uncover might shatter everything we thought we knew about ourselves. I hesitated, but only for a moment. Because in my heart I knew I had no choice. I had come this far. And the vault, whatever it contained, was waiting for me. The vault was a mystery that I couldn't ignore. The hatch had shifted beneath my fingers, and something deep within me knew it was calling me to uncover its secrets. But my team wasn't as convinced. They were still in the initial stages of their excitement, scanning the cavern with their lights and taking samples, unaware of the unsettling pull I was beginning to feel. It was in the quiet, the stillness that followed our discovery, that the first clue presented itself. I was standing alone beside the hatch, feeling the pulse of the cave in the thick air when I saw it, a symbol on the wall, partly obscured by vines. The faint outline of a crescent moon cradling a star, intersected by a spiral. It was the same symbol I'd seen in one of my ancient genetic manuscripts. My hands shook as I traced the image with my fingertips. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. How could it be here? In this place, in this cave, in this forgotten corner of the world? The symbol was a direct match to a set of cryptic references in the oldest texts I had studied, documents linking ancient civilizations to extraterrestrial visitors. The very same visitors I had always thought were just legends. But now, standing there, the symbol was like a beacon. The panic, the fear, both were undeniable. But also, I felt a strange exhilaration, a rush of adrenaline as the pieces started to fit together in my mind. This was no ordinary discovery. This was proof of a connection, a hidden history that spanned millennia. The kind of discovery that would change everything. But who was behind this vault? And why leave a message meant only for the right person to find it? I turned to my team, but they were still focused on other aspects of the cave. They weren't picking up on the significance. I was alone in my understanding of what we had found, and in that isolation, doubt began to creep in. Was I imagining things? Was the excitement blurring my judgment, or was this truly something extraordinary? I pulled out the field journal I'd brought along, scribbling down everything I could remember from the manuscripts. The genetic connections, the symbols, the cryptic clues. There was something that nagged at me, something in my gut that told me to keep searching. I knew the vault's key was buried in this cave, but how could I get to it without alerting the wrong people? How long would it take before someone, anyone, came looking for the secrets we were uncovering? I decided to take a risk. I'd learned enough in my years of research to know that this vault held more than just genetic evidence. It was part of a much larger puzzle, one that spanned the ages. I motioned to one of my colleagues, Martin, and quietly asked him to join me. I didn't trust anyone else with this yet, but Martin was different. He had always supported my ideas, no matter how outlandish they seemed. "We need to move fast," I whispered to him, pointing to the symbol on the wall. This is part of something bigger. The vault isn't just a piece of our past, it's a warning. He squinted at the symbol, then back at me, unsure of what he was looking at. Are you sure about this, Alina? I nodded, though doubt lingered in my mind. This was bigger than any theory I had ever entertained. The implications were astronomical. And yet, the truth felt just beyond my reach. Still, I knew that whatever lay ahead, it was far more than a simple archaeological discovery. It was a genetic enigma that demanded answers. Before I could continue, the ground shook beneath our feet, a low, rumbling tremor that sent dust falling from the ceiling. The walls seemed to vibrate, and for a moment, I thought the cave itself might collapse. The lights flickered, and an unsettling sense of danger crept up my spine. It was as if the vault was warning us, as if the secrets we were about to uncover would not be easily shared. I held my breath as the tremors subsided, my pulse quickening in my chest. Was it just an earthquake? Or was this something more, a sign, perhaps, that the vault's guardians were sending us a message? Martin looked at me with wide eyes, his voice barely a whisper. What the hell was that? Before I could answer, I felt it, the faintest hum, deep beneath the ground. It was almost imperceptible, like a pulse, rhythmic and deliberate. I looked down at the hatch again. It was now slightly ajar, just enough for the light to catch the edge of something metal inside. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. We were no longer just uncovering a relic. We were standing on the precipice of something much more dangerous. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. I could hear my heart thudding in my chest as I stared down at the now slightly open hatch. The strange hum from beneath the ground had faded, leaving a quiet that felt too profound for comfort. Something was happening, something that couldn't be explained by mere geological activity or natural forces. And that was only the beginning. As I knelt by the hatch, carefully trying to open it further, I heard a voice behind me. Alina! I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. It was Elias Markov, one of the researchers I had trusted, a man I had thought of as an ally. He stood at the entrance of the cave, his shadow stretching long in the dim light of the flashlight. His face was unreadable, but his posture was tense. Too tense. He had been part of my team since the early days of this project, but something in his eyes now made me uneasy. What are you doing here? I asked, trying to mask the sudden unease crawling under my skin. I should be asking you that, Elias replied, stepping closer. This isn't something you should be messing with, Alina. You don't know what's inside that vault. I frowned, my instincts flaring. What do you mean, I don't know? I'm here to uncover the truth. We've only just scratched the surface. No, Elias interrupted, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard it before. You don't understand the magnitude of this discovery. It's not just about uncovering ancient artifacts. What you're about to unlock, what you're playing with, is not just history. It's something far worse. His words struck me like a cold slap to the face. I didn't understand. Or maybe I didn't want to understand. I'm not following you, Elias. What are you talking about? I demanded, my voice low but firm. He glanced at the vault, his gaze flickering with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, perhaps? A look of someone who knew far too much and wasn't willing to share. He looked back at me, his jaw tightening. There are people, Elias said slowly, choosing his words with care, who've known about this vault long before you or I. People who want to keep it hidden. People who've made sure no one could ever get close to it. I shook my head, confusion swirling in my mind. Are you saying there's some kind of conspiracy? A cover-up? Yes, he replied, his voice lowering as if afraid of being overheard. But not just any cover-up. There's a shadow organization, secretive, powerful, and with far-reaching influence. They're not just trying to suppress your research. They're monitoring you. They know everything you found, every move you've made. A chill ran down my spine. It couldn't be possible. Who could be watching us in a place so remote, so isolated? But the tension in the air was undeniable now. There was something dark in Elias' eyes, something I hadn't seen before. Something desperate. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice trembling with suspicion. "Why now? What's your part in all of this?" He took a deep breath, as though weighing the risk of speaking further. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "Because they know about you too. About your research, your potential. And they'll stop at nothing to make sure that vault stays shut." I stared at him, a sinking feeling forming in my stomach. The vault was no longer just a scientific curiosity. It had become a danger, a nexus of forces far beyond my comprehension. Who were these people, and why had they been keeping something so powerful hidden for so long? Before I could ask any more questions, a sound echoed in the distance, the unmistakable whir of a helicopter. My heart skipped a beat. Elias looked at me, his face pale. "It's too late. They've found us." I turned toward the entrance of the cave, the sound of the helicopter growing louder with each passing second. The team was still scattered, unaware of the threat descending upon us. But Elias knew. He had known all along. "Get inside," Elias urged, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from the vault. "We don't have much time." My mind raced. What did he mean by too late? And who exactly was coming for us? The helicopter hovered just above the cave entrance, its rotors cutting through the heavy air with a deafening roar. The shadow of a black van appeared below it, skidding to a halt as men in dark suits emerged, scanning the area. "We need to hide the vault," Elias whispered urgently. "We can't let them see what we've uncovered." As I followed him into a narrow tunnel off to the side of the cave, panic set in. Whoever these people were, they were prepared. And they were here for the vault. For what lay inside it. I stole a glance back at the now closed hatch, my thoughts clouded with doubt and fear. We had just uncovered the tip of the iceberg. What was it they didn't want us to find? And what was so dangerous about it that they would go to these lengths to stop us? Elias didn't answer. Instead, he pressed forward, pulling me deeper into the shadows, where we would wait. I could feel the weight of the conspiracy closing in around us, the danger growing as we moved further from the surface. And as I descended into the darkness, the questions that plagued my mind only deepened. What had I truly uncovered? And more importantly, what was I willing to risk to find out the truth? The days that followed felt like a blur. We barely made it out of the cave that night, Elias pulling me into the narrow tunnel, the sound of the helicopter's engines thundering overhead. The team was scattered and unaware of the gravity of the situation, but Elias and I knew that our lives had just taken a sharp turn toward danger. The vault, the discovery that had seemed so promising just hours ago, was now a symbol of everything we couldn't explain. We managed to find shelter in a small, inconspicuous cabin just outside the excavation site, hidden away in a dense forest. But even in the solitude, I couldn't escape the feeling that eyes were watching us, even here. Every creak of the floorboards, every passing car outside made my heart race. We were no longer just researchers. We were fugitives, on the run from forces far beyond our understanding. Elias and I barely spoke the first few hours after we arrived. We were both too overwhelmed, too shaken by the events that had unfolded. It wasn't until nightfall that I mustered the courage to bring up the one thing I couldn't stop thinking about, the vault. "I need to know more," I said quietly, breaking the silence. "What do you know about them, Elias? Who are they, really?" Elias sat across from me, his face drawn, his eyes hollow. He looked older somehow, as if the weight of everything was finally taking its toll. He took a deep breath before answering, his voice barely above a whisper. "They call themselves the Order of the Veil. A secretive group, with ties to ancient organizations. I've known about them for years, but never in this context. They've been monitoring human progress for centuries, hiding in the shadows. I always thought they were just a myth, like something out of a conspiracy theorist's wild imagination. He paused, rubbing his face in frustration. But now, I see they were always one step ahead. They knew about the vault before we did. They knew about you. My heart skipped a beat. Me? Why me? Elias shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Your research, Alina. It's not just about ancient civilizations or genetics. You're on the verge of uncovering something they've worked to bury. Something they don't want the world to know. My mind raced as I processed his words. If what Elias was saying was true, then my discovery had already set something into motion, a chain of events that had been waiting to unfold. I hadn't been just a researcher. I had become a key player in a much larger game, one that had been in motion long before I had even discovered the vault. But why keep it hidden? I asked, leaning forward. What's so important about the vault? Why risk everything to keep it a secret? Elias sighed heavily, running his hand through his hair. I don't know the full answer, but I have my theories. The vault is a relic, something far older than anything we've seen before. But it's not just a tomb or a chamber. It's a message, an ancient warning perhaps. Whoever left it behind, they were trying to tell us something. And the Order of the Veil? They'd been trying to make sure no one gets to it. I sat back, processing everything Elias had just revealed. It wasn't just about unlocking humanity's past. It was about something much darker, something that could alter the future of the human race. The vault wasn't merely a genetic puzzle. It was a key to something larger, and the people who sought to control it were prepared to stop anyone who got too close. The silence between us was thick with the weight of the conspiracy, but I knew I had no choice but to keep digging. There were answers hidden somewhere, and I was determined to find them. I need more information, I said finally, my resolve hardening. We need to keep looking, even if it means digging through everything we've found so far. Elias nodded, his eyes locking onto mine. I have some contacts. People who might be able to help us, get us the information we need. But be warned, Alina, the deeper we go, the more dangerous it will get. The Order won't stop. I wasn't naive. I knew there was no turning back. The vault had already begun to unravel my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. But as Elias pulled out a few old files, his hands shaking slightly as he passed them to me, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both already in too deep. The files contained documents, maps, codes, and fragmented genetic sequences that appeared to link the vault to several ancient civilizations. Some of the texts were written in languages I had never seen before, but the patterns were unmistakable. The symbols that matched those etched into the vault's surface. There was something bigger here, something ancient, hidden beneath layers of history and secrecy. As I pored over the files, one document caught my eye, a set of coordinates, pointing to a location not far from where we had uncovered the vault. But the coordinates weren't just a random marker. They seemed to point to a place known to the Order. A place where they had conducted research, where their influence had shaped the course of history. I looked up at Elias. We need to go there. Right now. Elias hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. I'll make the arrangements. It's risky, but we don't have a choice. The night stretched on, filled with the hum of the wind outside and the sound of pages turning. The deeper we went, the closer we came to the heart of the conspiracy. I couldn't help but feel the sense of impending danger. But there was no turning back now. The vault was calling to me, and I was about to answer. I wasn't sure how much time had passed since Elias and I made our decision to follow the coordinates. The days had begun to blend together, an endless cycle of urgency and fear, with each passing hour raising more questions than the last. Despite everything, despite the looming threats, the secrecy, the growing tension between us, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that we were finally on the brink of uncovering the truth. The coordinates had led us to a remote area in the mountains, a location hidden beneath layers of forests and rocks. It was difficult to believe that anyone would think to look for anything significant here. But as Elias and I stood at the edge of a rocky outcrop, staring at the strange structure carved into the side of the mountain, I knew we had found something that no one could ever have anticipated. The structure wasn't just a building or an ancient ruin. It was something more intricate, almost like an altar. The carvings on the stone were different from the ones we'd seen in the cave. These were more detailed, more purposeful. As I approached, my fingers lightly brushed against the carvings, symbols, equations, and images that seemed to align with the genetic sequences I'd been studying. The air around us felt charged with a strange, electric energy, and it wasn't just the static in the atmosphere. There was something in the stone itself, as if the structure had been waiting for us to arrive, to activate it. The feeling of being watched intensified, my senses on high alert. I could feel Elias' eyes on me, but I didn't dare look back. I had to concentrate. This was it, the breakthrough I had been waiting for. "There's a control panel here," Elias muttered, pointing to a small, nearly hidden recess in the wall. It was cleverly disguised, but it was unmistakable now that we knew to look for it. My heart raced as I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I slid my hand along the smooth surface. The symbols from the cave, those same spirals, the crescent moon, were etched into the stone surrounding the panel. I wasn't sure what I was doing, but instinct took over. I pressed the sequence of symbols, almost on a whim. The moment I did, the ground beneath us seemed to rumble, a low, reverberating hum that sent a shockwave through the air. A stone door, hidden in plain sight, slowly began to open, revealing a darkened chamber. We stepped inside cautiously, our lights illuminating the space. What we found inside was beyond anything I could have prepared myself for. The chamber wasn't just a room. It was a laboratory, filled with equipment that looked like it belonged to a completely different era. Strange machines, most of them powered down, lined the walls. And in the center of the room was the most bizarre sight of all. A massive glass container stood in the center of the room, illuminated by a soft, pulsating glow. Inside the container was a set of intricate, yet strangely organic, machinery, a hybrid of technology, and something that looked like DNA. But it wasn't just any DNA. It was human. Or at least, something that resembled human DNA, but vastly different. The strands twisted and turned in on themselves, shimmering with an unnatural energy. I couldn't breathe for a moment, my mind racing. This was the proof I had been searching for. The answers were here. But they raised even more questions. What was this hybrid technology? Why had it been created? And who had left it behind? "This is it," I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from the container. "This is what they didn't want us to find." Elias stepped forward, eyes wide, his voice barely a whisper. "This is what they've been hiding all along. It's not just a vault. It's a genetic experiment, something that's been engineered, not by us, but by them. The ones who came before us. The creators." I felt a shiver run through me as his words sank in. He was right. The vault wasn't just a relic, it was the final proof that humanity had been altered, manipulated by beings who were far beyond our comprehension. And they weren't just watching us. They were waiting for us. "This is bigger than we thought," I said, my voice trembling. "This is the evidence of their involvement in our very creation." "But why? What is their endgame?" Elias didn't answer. Instead, he moved to one of the machines, examining it closely. His eyes narrowed as he traced a set of symbols on the surface. I could tell he was thinking, processing everything. I could hear the gears turning in his mind, the same questions I was asking. Suddenly, the machine in the center of the room emitted a low hum, and a display lit up. A series of coordinates flashed across the screen, along with a warning. It was written in an ancient script, one I recognized from the vault. My heart skipped a beat as I read it aloud. "The return is imminent. The time for awakening is near. Prepare for the final phase. The words hung in the air, the weight of their meaning settling heavily over me. The aliens, the creators, they were coming back. And they had been preparing us for their return all along. The chamber felt colder now, the air thick with tension. I turned to Elias, who was staring at the screen, his face pale. We both knew what this meant. We had to act fast. The secrets we had uncovered were far too dangerous to leave in the open. The Order of the Veil, those who had been trying to suppress the truth, weren't the only ones we had to worry about. The true threat was much more terrifying. The return of the creators was imminent. And we had no idea what they wanted from us. The discovery of the alien hybrid technology had shattered everything I thought I knew about human evolution. It wasn't just a groundbreaking find, it was a revelation. The answers were no longer in our past. They were staring us in the face, encoded in the very DNA we thought we understood. And it was right there, in the glowing container, pulsing like the heartbeat of some ancient, forgotten world. But the discovery of the coordinates, the cryptic warning, and the alien DNA wasn't enough. It wasn't just the structure of the hybrid that fascinated me. It was the message within it. If I was going to understand what had truly been left behind, I needed to decode the secrets hidden within the genetic material. And as I stood in that dimly lit room, the weight of the task seemed impossibly heavy. I sat at the machine in the center of the room, fingers trembling slightly as I activated it. The screen flickered to life, casting a blue light across my face. I could feel Elias standing behind me, watching, waiting, just as desperate for answers as I was. The silence between us was thick with anticipation. The machine prompted me to input the sequence. My mind raced as I recalled the strange, alien DNA from the container. It wasn't a normal sequence. It was too complex, far more intricate than anything we had ever seen before. It wasn't just human. It was an advanced hybrid of human and something else entirely. Something that had been manipulated and crafted over centuries. I glanced at Elias, unsure of how to proceed. I don't know where to begin. The sequence, it's so much more complex than anything we've studied. It's not just genetic data, Elias. It's a code. A message. Elias frowned, his eyes narrowing in concentration. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's not just about genetics. Maybe it's about the message itself, something encoded in the very structure of our DNA. I hesitated, trying to wrap my mind around his words. He was right in a way. The message wasn't simply biological. It was a blueprint for something greater. A warning, perhaps. But what? I began to input the first series of symbols that resembled nothing we had encountered before. The machine responded with a soft beep, and the screen began to fill with lines of data. I stared at the screen, entranced by the patterns unfolding before me. And then, something strange happened. The DNA strand on the screen began to change. It twisted and folded in ways that weren't possible in human biology. It was as if the code was alive, morphing in real time, adapting to the machine's response. I could barely keep up, my fingers flying across the keyboard as the data spiraled into a pattern that was both beautiful and terrifying. And then, as quickly as it started, the machine went silent. The screen froze. A single message flashed across it. "You are the key." I blinked, my breath catching in my throat. The words felt heavy, too heavy, as if they had been waiting for me, for this very moment. I turned to Elias, my mind racing. "What does it mean? What does this have to do with me?" Elias stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the screen, his expression unreadable. "It means what it says, Alina. You're not just the researcher. You're the key to unlocking whatever this is." I stared at him, feeling a surge of disbelief. "I don't understand. I'm just a scientist. A geneticist. Why would this be about me?" Elias was quiet for a long moment, then he said, his voice low and steady. "Your DNA. It's different, Alina. I didn't want to say anything before, but I've been running tests in the background, on your samples, on the data you've collected. Your genetic sequence, it's not entirely human. It's been altered. My mind reeled as I tried to process his words. Altered? How? Elias took a deep breath. You have a sequence, hidden within your DNA, that matches the hybrid code we just uncovered. Your genes are a direct link to the creators. You've been carrying it inside you all along. I staggered back, my knees almost giving way. My head was spinning. Was it possible? Could my very DNA hold the secret to unlocking the return of the creators? Could we, really be a part of their plan? But the implications were overwhelming. If I was the key, what did that mean for the future of humanity? Was I supposed to lead the way for the creators to return? Or was I meant to stop them? I closed my eyes, my heart pounding in my chest. There was so much I still didn't understand, so much I needed to figure out. But one thing was clear now: whatever my connection to this alien race, I had to make a choice. I had to decide what to do with the knowledge I had uncovered. As I opened my eyes, I noticed something else on the screen, a new message, flashing in red. It read, "The return begins. There is no turning back." A cold shiver ran down my spine. The creators were coming. They were no longer a myth. They were real. And their plan was unfolding, whether I was ready for it or not. The weight of the words on the screen hung in the air, thick with foreboding. The return begins. There is no turning back. My pulse quickened as I stared at the flashing text. The creators, whoever they were coming. There was no escaping it. But what did that mean for humanity? And what was I supposed to do now that I knew I was a part of this monumental shift? I turned to Elias, who had been quiet ever since the screen had gone silent. His face was drawn, the lines of worry etched deeper than I had ever seen before. He stood across from me, his arms folded, his gaze fixed on the ground. He had been the one to pull me into this, hadn't he? We had been partners in this discovery. But now, in the wake of the revelation, I wasn't so sure. "Elias," I said softly, my voice betraying the fear that had started to creep in. "What does this mean for me? What am I supposed to do with this information? What do the creators want from us?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the machine, his face unreadable. I could feel the tension between us, thick and suffocating. I wasn't sure what was happening, but something was off. The unease that had been growing in me ever since we started this journey was now a burning knot in my chest. Finally, he spoke, but his words were not the reassuring, supportive ones I had been hoping for. "Alina, you need to understand something. I never meant for you to get this involved," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "This was never supposed to be your fight. This was supposed to be mine." I felt my stomach drop. His words hit me like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. "We've been in this together. All along. Haven't we?" Elias didn't look at me. Instead, he walked over to a nearby console, his hands moving rapidly as he typed something into the machine. The soft hum of the machinery was the only sound between us for several long seconds. "You don't get it," Elias muttered, almost to himself. "You've always been the key, Alina. I've known that from the start. But I didn't know how far this would go. I didn't know it would come to this." I took a step toward him, my heart pounding. "What are you saying? That you've been using me?" Elias turned, and for the first time, I saw the coldness in his eyes, the same coldness that I had seen in the shadows of his words. He looked at me, and there was no trace of the man I had trusted, the man I had believed in. His eyes were empty. "I'm not using you," he said, his voice low and devoid of emotion. "I've been trying to control the situation. I needed to get close to you. But I never wanted you to know the truth. I never wanted you to be the one to unlock this. My mind reeled, the betrayal settling over me like a fog. I had trusted Elias. We had worked side by side, driven by the same passion for discovery. But now it seemed all of that had been a lie. I had been nothing more than a pawn in his game. My DNA, my very existence, had been part of a plan I had never been told about. You knew? I whispered, barely able to get the words out. You knew what I was getting involved in? And you didn't tell me? Elias's lips curled into a faint, almost sad smile. I didn't have a choice. You were always going to find out, Alina. I knew the moment we uncovered that vault, you'd be the one to crack it open. It was always meant to be you. But the creators, what they want, what they're going to do when they return, it's beyond anything you can comprehend. And I'm not ready to let them take over. I took a step back, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place in the most horrifying way. You've been working for them, haven't you? The Order of the Veil. That's why you've been so secretive. That's why you've been pulling the strings behind the scenes. Elias hesitated. Not for them, he said, his voice suddenly strained. Against them. The Order, they've been planning to use you, Alina. They want to control the return of the creators. But I won't let that happen. I've been trying to keep them from getting to you. A cold chill crept down my spine. This entire time, Elias had been playing both sides. He had been working to control the creators' return, but now it seemed like his true motives had nothing to do with stopping them. He was after something else, something even darker. The power of the hybrid DNA. My DNA. You've been manipulating me all along, I said, the realization cutting through me like a blade. I trusted you. I thought you were trying to help me. I was, Elias said, almost pleading. I didn't want you to be the key. I didn't want you to be this involved, but you are. And now you have to make a choice. I shook my head, the anger rising in my chest like a tidal wave. A choice? What choice? Elias took a step toward me, his voice urgent. You have to decide, Alina. You're the key. You can open the door to the creators, or you can close it forever. The Order wants to use your power to control everything. I want to stop them. But I need you to help me. I was caught between betrayal and desperation, my thoughts spinning out of control. Could I trust him again? Had everything he said been a lie? Was I just another piece in a game I hadn't signed up for? I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Elias, I said, my voice trembling. He looked at me with a mixture of frustration and something else, something I couldn't quite place. You don't have a choice. We've gone too far now. And in that moment, I realized that the conspiracy was no longer just about uncovering the truth. It was about choosing a side. And I wasn't sure which side I was on anymore. The air was thick with tension as Elias and I stood facing each other in the dimly lit room. His words still echoed in my ears. You have to decide, Alina. But how could I make a choice when I didn't even understand what was at stake? The creators were coming. The message was clear. But whose side was I really on? The betrayal stung, but it was also a wake-up call. The secrets Elias had been keeping, the twisted game he had been playing, it wasn't just about controlling the creator's return. It was about power. My power. And now I was caught in the middle of it all. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. The creators were not a myth. They were real, and they had been waiting for something. For me. It was as though they had been preparing me my whole life for this moment, and now I had to make a decision that would change everything. But how could I decide when I didn't even know what the consequences would be? My thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, eerie hum that vibrated through the floor. At first, I thought it was just the machines around us, malfunctioning again. But then it grew louder, resonating in my bones. My breath caught in my throat as I turned to Elias. What the hell is that? I demanded, my voice trembling. Elias didn't answer immediately. His face was pale, his eyes darting nervously to the walls. "It's them," he finally said, his voice strained. "They've found us." Before I could ask what he meant, the hum intensified, and the room seemed to shimmer with a strange light. My head felt light, my vision blurry, as if the very fabric of reality was bending. And then it happened. A figure appeared in the doorway, bathed in the same unearthly glow. It was tall, impossibly slender, with skin that shimmered like liquid silver. Its features were human, but just barely. Its eyes, large and black, glowed with an intelligence that sent a chill down my spine. The air around it seemed to crackle, charged with an energy that made my skin tingle. It stepped forward, and despite my fear, I found myself unable to move. I could feel Elias beside me, his breathing shallow and fast, but I didn't dare look at him. I couldn't take my eyes off the being in front of me. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if studying me. Then, in a voice that was both soft and resonant, it spoke. "You are the one," it said, its voice vibrating in my chest. "The key to unlocking our return." I froze. My mouth went dry, and for a moment I thought I might pass out. I had read about alien encounters in books, seen them in movies, but nothing prepared me for this. This being wasn't just some alien from another world. It was something else entirely, a part of the very fabric of humanity's past and future. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What do you want from me?" The creature's black eyes seemed to soften, though it was hard to tell. "We are the creators. The ones who shaped your kind. We have waited, as you have waited. Your DNA holds the final key, the final piece to the puzzle." I shook my head, confusion and fear clouding my thoughts. "I don't understand. Why me? Why my DNA?" The alien stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. "You are our design. Your genetic structure is the bridge between us and your world. It is you who will decide whether we return to reclaim what is ours, or whether your world remains free of our influence." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. The weight of its words settled over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about uncovering the past. This was about the future, my future, humanity's future. The choice was mine, and yet I didn't know how to make it. Could I really allow these beings, these creators, to return and reshape humanity according to their design? Or was I meant to stop them, to fight against everything they represented? Before I could respond, Elias stepped forward, his voice shaking. "We need time. We need to figure this out. We can't just hand everything over to you." The creature's eyes flickered to him, and for a moment, I thought it might speak to him. But instead, it turned back to me. "Time is irrelevant. You have already been chosen. The decision has already been made. It is simply a matter of whether you accept it." The room seemed to grow colder as the alien's presence filled every inch of the space. I could feel the weight of its words pressing down on me, urging me to make a choice. But I wasn't ready. I couldn't be. How could I accept the return of a species that had shaped us in ways I couldn't even begin to understand? I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. "I need more time," I said, the words barely escaping my lips. "I need to understand what's at stake." The creature seemed to consider this for a long moment. "You will have your time, Alina. But remember, the longer you wait, the more difficult your choice will become." With that, the creature turned and began to fade, the light around it dimming until it was gone. The hum that had filled the room slowly dissipated, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I stood there, frozen, my mind reeling. What had just happened? Had it been real? Or was I losing my grip on reality? But one thing was clear: what I had uncovered, what I had been chosen for, was far bigger than anything I had ever imagined. The creators were real, and they were waiting for me to decide their fate. The silence in the room was oppressive, a blanket of uncertainty pressing down on me. The creature, the creator, I should say, had come and gone with words that still echoed in my mind. You have already been chosen. Those words, filled with both promise and warning, seemed to reverberate in the air long after the being had disappeared. I could barely comprehend what had happened. The sheer weight of it all felt like a 1,000-pound stone pressing down on my chest. I had always thought of myself as a scientist, a seeker of truth, but now I was faced with the decision that no research, no discovery, no theory could have ever prepared me for. Elias was sitting in the corner, his face hidden in his hands, and I could feel the tension in the air between us. We hadn't spoken since the creature's departure. I didn't know what to say to him. How could I? He had been my partner, my ally, but everything had changed. His true motives had been exposed, and now, I wasn't sure I could trust him anymore. I don't know what to do, I whispered, breaking the silence. My voice sounded small in the vast room, a contrast to the immense weight of the choice before me. Elias looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot, his face hollow. You have to choose, Alina. It's why they're here. It's why they've been waiting for you. They believe you're the key, but I think they've underestimated you. I couldn't understand what he meant. Was he implying that I could stop them? Could I really make a choice that would change the future of humanity? The creators had shaped us, manipulated our very genetic code, and now they were offering me a chance to decide whether they would reclaim control or whether we would remain free. I glanced at the machine in the center of the room, the one that had shown me the first glimpse of the hybrid DNA, the key that connected me to the creators. The screen was still glowing faintly, as though waiting for something, waiting for me to make my decision. But how could I make such an enormous choice when the consequences were so unclear? If I allowed the creators to return, what would become of humanity? Would we be their servants, molded into something we were never meant to be? Or would we find a way to resist them, to break free from their control? I thought back to the warnings I had read in the documents, the cryptic symbols I had seen etched into the walls of the vault, the constant pressure to uncover the truth. It wasn't just a genetic mystery I had uncovered, it was a moral dilemma, a question of free will versus destiny. The creators had designed us, but did that give them the right to control us? I can't do it, I said, more to myself than to Elias. I can't be the one to decide. Not like this. Elias stood up, crossing the room to where I stood. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. You don't have to decide alone, he said. You're not the only one who's been affected by this. The whole world will be, whether we want it or not. But you're the one who can make the difference. You've already proven that. You're the key, Alina. What happens next depends on you. His words echoed in my mind, and for a moment I thought about everything I had learned, everything I had discovered in the past few days. The vault, the DNA, the symbols. Everything was connected. But how could I turn back now? How could I simply walk away from this, knowing that the creators were waiting for my decision? I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. This wasn't just about the truth anymore. It was about my place in a world that had been shaped by forces beyond my comprehension. Could I accept what I had become, the bridge between humanity and the creators? Or would I fight to protect the world I knew, even if it meant turning my back on everything I had uncovered? I opened my eyes, looking at Elias, my heart pounding. What do you want me to do? I asked, the question feeling like an impossible burden to bear. Elias's expression softened, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something resembling vulnerability in his eyes. I want you to choose what's right for you, he said. What's right for all of us. But you're the one who has to live with the consequences. No one else can make this decision for you. I turned back to the screen, the glowing text still haunting me. You are the key. The creature had said I had been chosen. But had I been chosen by them, or had I chosen this path myself? Was this my fate, or was I still in control of my own future? I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The weight of the decision was unbearable, and yet I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. Whatever I chose, it would shape not only my life but the future of humanity. I looked back at Elias one last time, then turned toward the machine. The moment of truth had arrived. I had to make my choice. I stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a suffocating cloud. The screen in front of me flickered softly, casting a dim light on the walls of the chamber. The creature's words still echoed in my mind. "You are the key." The choice was mine, but the consequences of it were too vast, too incomprehensible. How could anyone be prepared for something like this? I could feel Elias watching me, his presence a constant reminder of the stakes. He had been with me from the start, guiding me, pushing me, and now he was standing at the crossroads, waiting for me to make a decision that would forever change the course of our history. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, caught between two futures, one where I embraced the Creator's return, and another where I fought to protect the world I had always known. The air was heavy with anticipation, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to take the next step. I thought of the world outside, the people, the cultures, the lives we had built. Would I be willing to let it all go, to allow the creators to return and reshape humanity in their image? What would that even mean for us? Would we become a subjugated species, part of some greater cosmic experiment, or would we be allowed to live freely, with the knowledge that we were the product of an ancient, alien design? I felt my hands tremble, the fear creeping up my spine. The burden of this decision was crushing. How could I possibly know what was the right choice? But as I stood there, a quiet realization settled over me. It wasn't about what was right or wrong. It was about what I believed. It was about the future I wanted to build, the future I wanted humanity to have. I turned toward Elias, who was standing just behind me. His face was etched with concern, but there was also a flicker of hope in his eyes. He had believed in me, trusted me, every step of the way. Now it was my turn to prove whether I could be the person he thought I was. "I've made my decision," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I won't let them return. I won't let the creators take over. This world, our world, has the potential to be something greater. It's not perfect, but it's ours. We're not their experiment. We're more than that." Elias didn't speak for a long time, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. The weight of my decision was just as heavy on him as it was on me. Finally, he nodded, a look of reluctant understanding passing between us. "If that's your choice," he said quietly, "then I'll stand with you. Whatever it takes." I turned back to the machine, the glow from the screen now seeming more like an oppressive force than a source of illumination. The decision had been made, and now it was time to act. I reached forward, my fingers trembling as I activated the final sequence, the one that would lock the creators out. The screen flashed violently, the symbols shifting in a whirlwind of light and sound. The chamber seemed to tremble around us, as though the very walls were protesting my decision. I held my breath, my eyes fixed on the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment, it seemed like nothing was happening. The tension was unbearable. But then, the screen went dark. The hum in the air, the strange energy that had filled the room, suddenly stopped, leaving a deep, unnerving silence in its wake. I exhaled the breath I hadn't realized I had been holding. The creators were gone, locked out, sealed away. The future of humanity was no longer in their hands. For better or worse, we had our freedom. But I knew this wasn't the end. There would be consequences to what I had done. There would be those who would come after us, those who wouldn't accept our decision. The Order of the Veil would not rest until they had their way. And the world, though free, would never be the same again. But for now, in this moment, I felt a sense of peace. We had chosen our own path. We were no longer puppets in some ancient, alien design. I turned to Elias, who was watching me, his face unreadable. We did it, I said quietly. He nodded, his lips curling into a faint, weary smile. For now. And with that, we walked out of the chamber, into the uncertain future we had just claimed for ourselves. The world was ours to shape,